evening and welcome to the 80th Fine Gael Ard Fheis, the first online Ard Fheis to be held by Fine Gael or any other political party in Ireland. The last time we gathered for an Ard Fheis was in November 2018. What a different time that was. Of course, we didn't know then how things would change and never envisaged that our next Ard Fheis we wouldn't be gathered in a hall or a conference venue, but rather we'd all be joining from homes, offices and other locations around the country. So wherever you're joining from tonight, you are very welcome. I'd like to congratulate you all on how you've moved the activities of the party online, from branch and constituency meetings to AGMs, co-options and selection conventions and public meetings. We've seen officer boards, members and public representatives ensure that we can continue the work of Fine Gael while maintaining social distancing. In fact, some of the newer initiatives within the party, such as the Front Row Policy Series and the Policy Lab that was developed by Deputy Richard Bruton, have seen fantastic participation from virtual audiences. And that's great to see. And we hope that in the world that we see as the pandemic eases and as we can gather again, that we can move to some sort of a hybrid model that will allow that participation to continue. We all hope that we are emerging from the worst of the pandemic and can look to a brighter future ahead. The hope that we now feel is very much thanks to the great work of the Tánaiste and his team of ministers, TDs and senators who provided such strong leadership and guidance throughout the last 15 months, and now as the country opens back up. So while the pandemic is very much the backdrop to this week's Ard Fheis, the focus is also on looking ahead and planning a better tomorrow. However, before we move forward, we need to remember those who we've lost and those who have lost people over the last 15 months. We remember them all and we offer our condolences to you. We also pay tribute to our essential workers in healthcare, on Garda Síochána, retail workers, and all of those who were on the COVID front line and protected us all since March of last year. You should all have received the Ard Fheis card or a link to it, and we hope you'll be able to join us for many of the sessions and that you will take part in voting on motions that will be proposed. We start tonight with the future of Ireland, North and South, and the future of agriculture. Tomorrow night, there'll be sessions for YFG and Fine Gael Intercultural. We will discuss remote working, a reality for so many of us, on Thursday, the future of business on Friday evening, and then a full day on Saturday with sessions on housing, party organisation, a fairer Ireland, justice and equality, and learning the lessons from COVID-19. Because we know there are lessons to be learned, and it is incumbent on our leaders and all of us to take those lessons on board. If you're hosting a Fine Gael evening with other members in accordance with the current guidelines, please send us a picture of your gathering to events@finegael.ie, and we look forward to seeing how members are finding time to get together in those small groups and to enjoy the Ard Fheis. I'm now going to put forward two proposals to you and ask you to vote on each. These will be the first two proposals for voting of this year's Ard Fheis. Firstly, I want to propose the appointment of chairpersons for all sessions. You will see the chairperson list in the CLAR, and I will ask you to vote for their appointment of them as a group. You will see the voting buttons on the right-hand side of your screen now, and I'll give you time to vote. So the proposal is to appoint chairpersons as listed in the CLAR for all sessions of the Ard Fheis. So please vote now. Hopefully you've all had a chance to vote now, so I'm going to put forward a second vote. And the next proposal is to propose the adoption of standing orders, which are also in the CLAR. And the standing orders have been amended to suit the online format. So again, you'll see the voting buttons on your screen on the right-hand side, and I'll give you time once again to vote. So the proposal is to adopt the standing orders as outlined in the CLAR, and I'll ask you to vote on that now, please. Thank you. I'm going to be closing the vote on this in a couple of seconds, so I'll ask you to vote on the adoption of the standing orders, please. Okay, we'll close the voting on that. And so while I'm waiting for the results of both votes, Let me call your attention to another vote coming up. The writ for the by-election in Dublin Bay South will be moved tomorrow, so we will have a confirmed polling date. We have a fantastic candidate in Councillor James Gael, and along with his team, he's bringing in energy and a real enthusiasm to his campaign on the ground. So I'd ask you all that you do whatever you can to get out and support James over the coming weeks. Please give some of your time to whether it's postering, leafleting, or even if we get an opportunity to canvass, please get out and about and support James. And if you can't be on the ground in Dublin Bay South, please tell friends or family that live in the constituency that Fine Gael has a great candidate in James Gagan. He'll make a great TD and we need to see him elected to Dáil Éireann. I would like to thank the Ard Fheis organising committee for all of their hard work in putting the programme together, in particularly Terry Murphy in HQ, who has always been instrumental in the organisation and without whom we probably wouldn't have an Ard Fheis. So thank you, Terry. I'm just getting the votes. So the results in, just to confirm that the results in for those two votes, that the proposal to appoint chairpersons as this in the Clár has been passed, and the proposal to adopt the standing orders also in the Clár has also been passed. So thank you for those. I'd like to pay tribute to someone who retired last year and because of the restrictions didn't get the send-off he deserved. Tom Curran was General Secretary of Fine Gael for over 20 years, overseeing many an Ard Fheis and special conference, driving change across the organisation, ensuring that we moved with the times, but always with the Fine Gael values at the heart of the party. Tom's commitment to Fine Gael was unquestionable, and I would like to thank him on behalf of my colleagues in the Executive Council and the wider party for all that he did. I would also like to thank him personally for all the support he gave me as chair of the Executive Council. I hope he's enjoying retirement, although knowing Tom, I'm sure he's finding plenty of things to do. I'd like to send my best to him and his family. Enjoy the Ard Fheis. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your support of the party. And now I'll introduce our leader and president of Fine Gael, Tánaiste. Thank you.
Steve, Agus Fáilte Gael. It's a pleasure to speak to you today from Fine Gael headquarters here in 51 Upper Mount Street. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 80th Fine Gael Ard Fheis, the first to be held online. Next time, as we embrace the new normal post-pandemic, our Ard Fheis will be hybrid, with people attending in person, but also people joining us online. But for now, a special welcome to everyone joining us from home, or hopefully their garden on this beautiful sunny evening. A lot has happened since our last Ard Fheis. Brexit, a general election, a pandemic, a historic coalition, and a third successive term in government for our party. The theme of this conference is the future, an opportunity for us to discuss the Ireland that we, the Fine Gael team, want to build when the pandemic is over. So I think it's fitting that we'll start our programme tonight with a discussion on Northern Ireland and our future together. Before I do that though, I want to start with a few words of thanks. First of all, to our chairperson tonight, Fiona O'Connor, and her colleagues on the Executive Council, to those on the Ard Fheis subcommittee, and to headquarters staff who worked so hard to prepare for this event. I'd also like us to take this opportunity to remember some of the colleagues who we've lost since we last met, many of whom we would have liked to attended their funerals but weren't able to because of the restrictions. Some who we could. They include Eddie Collins, Richie Ryan, John Brown, Liam White, Terry Brennan, Tom O'Donnell, PJ Sheehan, and his wonderful wife Frances. We also remember the many former councillors, officers and members who passed away since we last met. May they rest in peace. So Chairperson, let's turn now to the topic of the evening, Northern Ireland, and allow me to start with a few words on the current dispute in relation to the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. Fine Gael is a party that believes in free trade and on multilateralism. We're a party that's all about building bridges and taking down borders. We do not want, and we've never wanted, any barriers to trade. North-south, between Britain and Ireland, or between Britain and Northern Ireland. That's why we, along with the majority of people and majority of parties in Northern Ireland, oppose Brexit. However, the decision to opt for a hard Brexit made it inevitable that checks and controls would have to happen somewhere. And it is much better that these should take place in 2 or 3 ports or airports, rather than multiple border crossings along 10 border counties. There were alternatives. The UK staying in the customs union single market, we said yes to that. A single customs territory as a default, the backstop, we said yes to that too. And when all these were rejected, a Northern Ireland only solution, now known as the protocol, was the only option, and we said yes to that as well. It's a protocol that we negotiated, we co-designed with Michel Barnier and Prime Minister Johnson and his team, and it's a protocol that we stand over. Under the terms of the agreement, it can only be disapplied should the Northern Ireland Assembly vote to do so, and there's no majority for that. So there should be no unilateral action either by London or Brussels on this matter. We fully appreciate the practical difficulties the protocol has caused for some in Northern Ireland, and the disturbance and distress it's caused for many unionists. We're also conscious that the opponents of the protocol have not come forward with solutions that would remove the need for checks while ensuring the single market is protected and our place in it is not undermined. For our part, we remain absolutely committed to working through the European Union to find pragmatic solutions within the parameters of the withdrawal agreement. And I know it can be done. We've dealt with tougher negotiations in the past. The vast majority of checks and controls can be removed if we all agree to maintain the same high standards when it comes to food and veterinary rules and other items. Ideology, pride, nor nationalism of any form should prevent us from agreeing a solution. The consequences of failure are far too great, both in terms of the impact on trade and the economy here in Ireland and in Britain, and also on the politics in Northern Ireland. With all this in mind, I want to particularly recognise the role of our Deputy Leader, Simon Coveney, in ensuring that European unity remains solid behind Ireland, and that the US administration is appraised of the situation on a regular basis. Colleagues, a few years ago, I said that the tectonic plates were shifting in Northern Ireland, and in the centenary year of its foundation, I believe that to be true more than ever. The Assembly elections and the census tell us that in Northern Ireland, there is no majority anymore. There are 3 minorities, one that defines itself as British and Unionist, another as Irish and Nationalist, and a third and growing middle ground, many born since the Good Friday Agreement. We do not wish to be defined in this way. They see themselves as both British and Irish, or perhaps simply Northern Irish. What's most revealing in opinion polls is that even among the youngest voters, neither the Nationalist nor the Unionist parties have a majority due to this growing middle ground. And it is one of the most encouraging things that has happened since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. The future is not yet written, and nothing is inevitable. Delegates, I believe in the unification of our island, and I believe it can happen in my lifetime. It means the unification of the people of our island, as well as the territory of Ireland, and is a legitimate political aspiration. It's in our constitution, and is provided for in the Good Friday Agreement, should a majority of people in the North and South vote for it. The views of unionists must be acknowledged, understood, and respected, but no one group can have a veto on Ireland's future. We should be proud to say that unification is something that we aspire to. It should be part of our mission as a party to work towards it, and we can do so in many ways. First of all, we need to make sure that the Good Friday Agreement is working and working fully, and that all the institutions are functioning to their optimum level. While the North-South bodies and other institutions are operating, I do not believe they are meeting their full potential. We can work on this in government, and we will put in the hard yards. As a party, we need to increase our engagement with people and communities in Northern Ireland, and we can do this through the Northern Ireland Engagement Group under the chairmanship of Deputy Fergus O'Dowd. As well as this, I believe we should establish a branch in Northern Ireland with the same status as a constituency organisation in our rules, not with a view to contesting elections, but with the view to recruiting members, building networks with like-minded people, including those in other parties. We need to reach out to all sides, and we need a presence on the ground to do so. As Fine Gael ministers in government, we can advance the Shared Island Initiative through the departments which we lead. Infrastructure projects like the Ulster Canal, being led by Heather Humphreys, cross-border business and technology parks through my department, North-South research programs through Simon Harris, and of course, a dialogue led by us all, but particularly the Department of Foreign Affairs. In the months and years ahead, we will also press for greater alignment where we believe it makes sense. For example, on minimum unit pricing for alcohol, north and south of the border, so there's no disruption to trade. And also improved workers' rights, so there's fair competition for border businesses in particular. I believe that we as a party also need to spend some time developing our own vision as to what unification should look like. We know the crude vision being pushed by Sinn Féin. It's not an inclusive one. A cold and old form of republicanism. Socialist, narrow nationalist, protectionist, anti-British, Eurocritical, ourselves alone, 50% plus one and nobody else is needed. That's not a 21st century vision. Our vision must be different. It should be one that has the best chance of carrying the greatest number of people with us, both north and south. It should appeal in particular to that middle ground I spoke about earlier, to gain the support of people who identify as both British and Irish. So unification must not be the annexation of Northern Ireland. It means something more. A new state co-designed together, a new constitution, and one that reflects the diversity of a binational or multinational state in which almost 1 million people are British. Like the new South Africa, a rainbow nation, not just orange and green. We have to be willing to consider what we'd be willing to change. New titles, shared symbols, how devolution in Northern Ireland would fit into the new arrangements. A new Senate, perhaps, designed to strengthen the representation of all minorities. The role and status of all of our languages, and a new and closer relationship with the United Kingdom. We also need to map out how we can take the best of both jurisdictions and apply them across Ireland as a whole. Perhaps our welfare and pension system and their NHS, just to give 2 examples. And also consider what might remain different, because unification is not assimilation. Things can be different, north and south. Perhaps maintaining separate education systems or maintaining 2 legal systems if deemed appropriate. Until these questions are answered, and we have a clear proposition that we can put to the people on both parts of the island, then a border poll is premature and potentially very divisive. But having said that, we have a duty to engage actively with each other and others to find answers to the questions which I mentioned. And that is what we intend to do in the period ahead. I think in looking for inspiration, we need only look at our own party's history, to Griffith and Collins, who negotiated the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which envisaged a 32-county free state, to Liam Cosgrave, who negotiated Sunningdale and helped to establish the principle of cross-community power sharing in Northern Ireland, and above all, to one of our greatest leaders, Ard Fheis, who took huge risks in adopting the principle of consent, who established the forward-looking New Ireland Forum at a time of change, not unlike today, and who secured a role for Ireland in the affairs of Northern Ireland through the Anglo-Irish Agreement. 100 years ago, our party founded this state. And in the next century, I believe our party is best placed to unify our island. I hope you do so too. And I look forward to an open, honest, and reasoned debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tánaiste. I think your words are very true. The future is not yet written. And that's why it's so important that we continue to discuss what we want that future to look like. I'd like to introduce the chairperson of our first panel discussion, Senator Emer Curry. Emer was elected as a member of Fingal County Council in May 2019, and in June 2020 she was nominated to Shannon Éireann, where she is the Fine Gael spokesperson on employment affairs, work-life balance and Northern Ireland. And Emer will chair tonight's first session on our future together, North and South. Thank you, Emer.
Thanks a million, Fiona. It's an honour to be here this evening in HQ in unusual circumstances, but I hope it won't get in the way of a fulsome discussion this evening on what is such an important issue for us, and that is our future together, North and South. So delegates, if you have questions or comments, I would ask you to put them in the question section. I think there's a tab there for questions. At the end of this section, we will also be asking you to take part in the poll for each of the motions. But the first thing I have to do this evening is to introduce our panel. And this evening we have our Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister Simon Coveney. You're very welcome, Minister. We also have Deputy Fergus O'Dowd, who represents Louth, but who is also our chairman for the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement Committee, which I sit on. And he's also chairman of the Northern Ireland Engagement Group. And as you heard the Tánaiste say there, that is a group that we hope post-COVID is going to become even more active. And also we have Neil Richmond, Deputy Neil Richmond, who of course is a contributor in all things Northern Ireland and Brexit. And I'll just point to his recent paper Towards a New Ireland as well. And I think it's an essential starting point for anyone in Fine Gael that's interested in developing our position here. So before I move on to the motions, while we have the Minister here, I thought we might ask him some questions. But just before we do, Minister, I just want to say that I want to thank you, and I want to thank the Tánaiste and Minister McEntee and Enda Kenny as well, for always facing up to the reality of Brexit and trying to find solutions. And you're still very much in solution mode now. And I really feel that you have been sensitive to all the people on this island and true to the Good Friday Agreement. So, you know, and true to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement and the institutions over the last few years. And as someone who is from the North, and from a progressive nationalist background, although I think part of the discussion tonight will be how we are maybe moving away from all of the isms, and that can be that's a good thing. But I always felt that you represented me well and us well, but not at the expense of everyone else. And that is key to the functioning of the Good Friday Agreement. So, and I also want to say how in tune you are with about legacy issues, the trauma of legacy issues and the need to deal with our past in order to move forward. But at the same time, always promoting stability and recognising opportunity for the North and for the island as a whole and as relationships across these islands. So, you know, there was an emotion there that would commend you for the work and the Tánaiste and Minister McEntee. But I wanted to say that before we got into some questions for you, if that's okay. I'm really just trying to butter you up before I get into the difficult questions. So look, I know that you're very engaged with what's happening at the moment on the phone to the British government and to the parties in the North. And the clock is ticking since Arlene Foster's departure as First Minister. And where are we? Will Stormont and the executive be okay?
Well, thanks, Emer. And the first thing I'd like to say is it's really good to hear the Tánaiste, to hear Leo outlining a Fine Gael perspective and vision for the future in the medium term, because I think Ireland needs to be thinking ahead. And Fine Gael, as a party, has always been a party that prides itself on trying to think ahead in a way that's generous, in a way that's modern, in a way that reaches out and questions a lot of the old norms, so that we can actually design a future together, north and south on this island, in a way that is outward-looking, modern, embraces Britishness on this island, in a way that's confident in our Irishness. And that is what Fine Gael, I believe, has an obligation to do in the context of the leadership that our party needs to give on these big, big questions, which we will have to play our part in answering in the years ahead. But we have immediate crisis management also. As has been the case now for the last 3 or 4 years, there always seems to be an immediate obstacle to progress. Tension, polarization, division, standoffs. That's really been part of politics in Northern Ireland now for some time. Whether that's the absence of the executive up until a relatively short time ago, or whether it's been the pressure that Brexit and more recently the Northern Ireland Protocol has had on politics in Northern Ireland, and the strength of feeling in relation to some of those issues. The immediate challenge we face now is the survival of the institutions, because when a First Minister resigns and steps down, there is then a time period of 7 days for a new First Minister to be elected. And at the moment, we don't have a basis for electing a new First Minister, a new DUP nominated person to be First Minister. At the moment, we don't have the support of Sinn Féin for that nomination. And therefore, if we can't find a way of overcoming that obstacle in the next few days, well, then the very institutions of the Good Friday Agreement, in terms of an executive and a functioning assembly in Stormont, potentially is put at risk. So these are serious times in terms of the immediate challenges we face, as well as the medium-term and long-term thinking that Fine Gael has to reflect on. Can we do this week? Yes, we can. In many ways, the issue that is preventing a new First Minister being nominated and voted through is the commitments that were made in the latest Northern Ireland Agreement, which was the basis for setting up the current Executive and Assembly, which is called New Decade, New Approach. You might remember when Julian Smith was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and I announced that agreement on the steps of Stormont, and parties rode in behind it, and we got an executive back up and running. We now have to find a way of ensuring that trust, based on follow through on the commitments in that agreement from all parties, is the basis for a new executive with a new First Minister. And essentially what I'm saying is what Sinn Féin are asking for, and I don't think they're being unreasonable on this occasion, is that they want the DUP to support what was agreed in the New Decade, New Approach agreement, which is to legislate for language and culture in Northern Ireland. That's Ulster Scots, it's the Irish language, and a whole series of supportive structures around that recognition. At the moment, the DUP is saying they can't and won't do that in the lifetime of this executive. And I think if they hold that position, well, then the two governments need to intervene to find a way of breaking that deadlock. I think perhaps the way to do that is to legislate in a way that it has been committed to in New Decade, New Approach in Westminster. But of course, that has to be agreed by both governments, and of course, the parties have to be able to live with that compromise if it's not possible to pass that legislation in Stormont. But either way, all of the parties have an obligation, I think, to reflect on the responsibility they have to Northern Ireland at an incredibly vulnerable and volatile time. We're about to move into the marching season. The pandemic is far from over. We have a protocol to implement and agree, and we're going to talk about that now, I'm sure, in a few minutes, in terms of the compromises and the flexibilities that are needed to do that. So this is a time of change and political responsibility in Northern Ireland. And so my appeal is to all of the political leaders to work together to find a way of breaking the deadlock that is currently there. And certainly I can assure you that the Irish government and Fine Gael within the Irish government will do what it can, as we always do, to protect the Good Friday Agreement, its institutions, and the protections that it provides for relationships in Northern Ireland. I believe we can get that done, but I believe the two governments will need to work together and work with the parties to find a way of breaking that deadlock. But if you're asking me the question, can that be done? Yes, it can. And any party that provides a barrier that results in the collapse of the institutions, I think will be a party that will be treated very harshly by the electorate in Northern Ireland if that triggers an election.
Thank you for that, Minister. Yes, I am going to ask you about the protocol as well. So, I mean, Boris Johnson had his G7 overshadowed really by the Northern Ireland Protocol. So, you know, asking another difficult question, but what needs to change? Is it the Brexit deal, or is it the Boris Johnson's approach to it?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think anyone who is surprised that the G7 meeting was not so much dominated, but certainly heavily influenced by the responsibilities that the British government and the British Prime Minister has in the context of the protocol shouldn't have been surprised. You know, the strength of feeling in Washington on this issue is known and understood. The strength of feeling across the EU on this issue, particularly in countries like France and Germany, is well understood. Like, we spent years trying to design a solution, as the Tánaiste outlined earlier. Ireland was willing to support a number of solutions to manage the disruption that Brexit was going to cause. We were happy to accept a shared single market between the EU and the UK. We were happy to accept a shared customs union, but that was rejected. Both of those options were rejected. We then were happy to support a backstop, which was a UK-wide solution to deal with the Irish questions in terms of protecting the peace process and preventing border infrastructure. But that was rejected. And so in the end, it was the kind of Brexit that the British government insisted upon that determined the shape of the solution for the Irish questions. And that came eventually in the form of the protocol, which is a Northern Ireland specific solution, which was signed up to by the British government as part of the withdrawal treaty and is now international law. And so what the international community is saying to the British government is, you designed this, you ratified it, you won an election on the back of that withdrawal agreement, which included the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, and you agreed last December an implementation plan for that deal. And now you're unilaterally deciding to change elements of the deal, which is a fundamental breach of the agreement in itself. And so it's not surprising that Boris Johnson's peers from other countries in the G7 are saying, what's going on here? This has the potential to undermine the peace process in Ireland. Britain needs to follow through on its commitments, both legal commitments as well as political commitments that have been made. Now, having said all that, we do need to be realistic. The implementation of the protocol is difficult. There's very strong feeling, particularly in unionist communities and loyalist communities, in the context of the protocol, partly because I think it wasn't sold, honestly, when it was initially put in place. But the reality is we need to fix it now. And we have to find a way of implementing the protocol in a way that is consistent with it, but also in a way that is pragmatic and shows real flexibility. The EU is up for doing that. And there are ways in which we can dramatically reduce the impact of the protocol, but that requires partnership, not unilateral action by either the EU or the UK. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen so far from the British government. So, for example, if we could agree a common set of standards for sanitary and phytosanitary standards, which essentially is, a food safety and veterinary agreement between the EU and the UK, we could reduce the number of checks that are required in Northern Irish ports by 80%. 80%. I know the EU also wants to resolve concerns that many have around the access to medicines coming from Great Britain in terms of certification. The EU has a solution to that too. The EU is willing to look at extending grace periods to give businesses more time to adapt, to give authorities more time to put infrastructure in place to make the trading relationship east-west as seamless as possible. But this can only be resolved if both sides agree to work together, to compromise together, to show flexibility together in the interests of providing certainty and stability to Northern Ireland. And I have to say, having been involved in this process, the EU is very much up for doing that. And we hope and expect that, particularly given the pressure that we've seen over the last few days in the G7, that the British government's approach will now change and improve in the days and weeks ahead.
I sincerely hope so. Actually, there's loads of questions coming in, so I think we might move on to the motions and hopefully have a wider discussion about all of this as we progress. We have been joined by another panelist who is Councillor Winston Bennett. So just to welcome Councillor Bennett as well from Cavan. A lot of people here would be familiar with him. He's been a councillor, I think, since 2004. And of course, being from Cavan, he's directly affected by a lot of this. So look, we'll get stuck into the motions and then some of the questions as well. So with that, I'm going to move over to our first motion of the evening, which is being presented by myself and the Tánaiste's constituency, Dublin West. So Andrew Gallagher, if you are there and ready, you might take the floor.
Thank you, Emer. Tánaiste, elected members, delegates, it's my great honour to propose the first motion of the evening, that this Ard Fheis recognises the principles of the Good Friday Agreement as the foundation of continuing peace and prosperity on the island of Ireland, and calls on all parties to ensure that these are protected and enhanced in all future relationships across these islands. This is a precarious time. Brexit has altered our assumptions. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a subject of intense disagreement. The stability of the Good Friday institutions has been called into question, and serious conversations about constitutional change are now prime time television. That it is possible to have these conversations in a respectful and inclusive manner is welcome and clear evidence of how far we have come. So it is vital that we defend the great progress that has already been made and ensure that it is not put at risk. The principles of the agreements are as important now as they have ever been to ensure stability amid so much uncertainty. The Belfast Agreement's three strands are a recognition of complexity. No matter what happens in the future, this complexity will endure, and there is no broadly acceptable alternative to the three-stranded approach. But this principle is not a constraint. It is a foundation on which we can build. The political institutions should not be treated lightly or bargained away for some short-term tactical gain. The people of Northern Ireland deserve no fewer rights than their fellow citizens who live in other parts of these islands. They also deserve a functioning representative government. These principles are not in conflict, but reconciling them requires political will. We must all work for the full delivery of commitments that have already been made. The foundations of a healthy relationship are trust and good faith. Trust is precious, it is hard built and easily destroyed. Flexibility and compromise are virtues, but so are honesty and abiding by one's word. We have all made promises to each other and to future generations to come, and it is our duty to keep those promises. I ask this Ard Fheis to join me in reiterating our deep commitment as a party to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And this is a motion which I really resonates with me. And I think it reflects where we are in terms of both the present and seeking stability, and then also looking to the future and the agreements that already stand. So with that, I might move to Deputy O'Dowd. If you can unmute there, Deputy. Sure. This might be something that you might want to comment on.
Absolutely. I want to laud Andrew for the succinct way he put the proposition, and indeed the whole of Fine Gael, and indeed all reasonable people agree with it, north and south. And I think our job in the party is to, not just through our ministers and TDs, but right across all our functions, to work together. I think my job as chairman of the Fine Gael group is to make sure that our relationship with the political parties, particularly with alliance with Stephen Farry, who's already addressed the membership. We had Mike Nesbitt from the UUP who addressed us. And we have very good relationships, as you know, with the SDLP and so on. I've made contact with Jeffrey Donaldson before the recent leadership challenge. But I think we need to make significant progress by meeting, listening and agreeing, to differ on these issues, but to make a better Ireland. And I think the key point, some of the questions there was, how can we practically do that? And I think, the cooperation in local government between County Down, the Council in Down and the Council in Louth, where there's a joint agreement to work together to develop two dynamic economies where there was nothing but unemployment there in the past. The idea of developing the Northwest between Letterkenny and Derry, the whole west of what's called Northern Ireland has never developed because of partition. I think, improving our road network, our infrastructure. So we've huge work that we can do. So I think, in summary, that, I think we're well up to the job. I welcome the Tánaiste's new initiative in this whole policy area. And I commit to working with the party members and indeed with all of the parties in the North and build new relationships, for a new time for our country and build on the peace and most of all on the Good Friday Agreement, Emer.
Thank you, Deputy. I might just throw that to Deputy Richmond as well.
Thank you very much, Emer, and thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this wonderful motion, Andrew, and everyone in the Dublin West constituency, that sums up how important that every time we talk about the future, a shared future on this island, that all our conversations are always rooted in the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. Those who went before us 23 years ago to achieve that agreement have to be the guiding examples about what we can achieve with this entire island going forward. Emer, I'm very hopeful and optimistic, even though we're in difficult times now, for the future of this island. I think what we have now is an opportunity to use those institutions of the Good Friday Agreement to their best ability to improve relations, not just north-south, but crucially east-west, and ensure that Ireland absolutely is the UK's best friend within the European Union. We've been very lucky, not just in this party, but in this country, to have Leo and Simon at the helm of this debate for the last few years. And it's to their credit that the principles and, I suppose, the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement have been protected despite an onslaught of negativity. And it's absolutely our responsibility as a party, in the tradition of Fitzgerald and the tradition of the Anglo-Irish Agreement, to restate our commitment to the Good Friday Agreement, its principles, and crucially, its institutions.
Yeah. I might go to Minister Coveney as well.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I agree with everything that Neil has just said. I think that the role that Fine Gael has to play now is one of calmness and positivity, and really making an effort to reach out to those that have different perspectives. And as a party, we've been good at that. I think we are a friendly home for very diverse opinions politically. And the challenge I think that Leo has put to us this evening is something we need to think about and plan for, because at the moment there are so many people in Northern Ireland who lack trust in politics, and who are desperately polarised and anxious about what the future holds. And so our role in Irish politics, in the context of this broad debate around the future of our island together, I think has got to be one of leadership, of courage, but also modern thinking and generosity. This idea that we can unify the island, whether it's constitutionally or politically, by simply forcing our will on others, or, as Leo said, simply annexing the northern part of our island. That's not how we should see this. It's how some see it, unfortunately. But I think our vision has to be one that's far more inclusive and more broad in its thinking. And I think it's a real focus now, I think, for this party over the next few years. But we've also got to manage the immediacy of the challenges and the crises we face. And that's why this week is a big week for Northern Ireland. And we need to make sure that we find a way forward to protect the institutions, because ultimately the Good Friday Agreement is the only foundation we have as a basis for decision making and relationships on this island. And if we allow that to crumble or to not function, it would be, I think, a historic mistake. And that's why Fine Gael won't let that happen. But of course, we need partners to ensure that we can do it with them.
Thank you, Minister. And yes, you were instrumental in bringing about the New Decade, New Approach agreement, and we so very much want to see it implemented in all of its parts. I agree, Fine Gael is in, I think, a very good position to be leading the vision of an inclusive new Ireland. And as I said earlier, breaking away from the isms of the past and leading out something that is progressive and pluralist. So just comments from others. Walter Hassett has said, a united Ireland will be slow and will take time to tease out. Fortunately, Fine Gael have the intelligence and experience to negotiate in the process. And we've I might just read out a couple of questions that you might bear in mind, panel, whenever you are giving responses. But here's one from Fergal Brown. It would be great to see one soccer team for the island of Ireland. The only main sport where divide exists. It would be a good barometer of public mood and gauge level of support for greater cooperation. A united Ireland is an opportunity. This is from David Garrahy. United Ireland is an opportunity to reconsider how Ireland is governed. How could this look at the level of local government? So whenever we come to Councillor Bennett, he might have something to say about that. But for now, we'll move on to the second motion of the evening, and that is from Monkstown, and I think it is from our Councillor Lorraine Hall. So Lorraine, if you are available there to unmute and to present your motion, please.
Tánaiste, ministers, elected members and delegates, I'm delighted to propose the second motion that Fine Gael commits to supporting minority faith traditions and urges all political parties to unite hearts and minds in Northern Ireland before they consider uniting the island of Ireland. I suppose as a Protestant from County Cavan that grew up close to the border during the Troubles, and after that, there have been times where I've asked myself, am I fully Irish? And I know that sounds unusual to listeners this evening, but at every single stage of my upbringing, I was made feel like I was different because of my religious background. I was sent to a separate primary and secondary school, segregated. I attended a different church. I participated in different sports to my peers and celebrated different cultural events. And my 1990s self remembers questioning the logic of it all. If the objective in my mind was peace and integration, why was there so many barriers keeping us all apart? I suppose it's only really in recent years, partly driven by my work with Minister Heather Humphreys on the Ireland 2016 Centenary Programme, that I really began to believe that you can be Protestant and proudly Irish, that you can be of Ulster Scots heritage like me and be proudly Irish, and that you can play so-called garrison sports and yet still be proudly Irish. And that it's actually those people who make you feel like you're lesser Irish, or those people who behave like there's a hierarchy of Irishness, that they are the people who do not live up to our ideals as a republic. If we really consider ourselves to be a modern multicultural Ireland, that includes accepting those of us that don't readily or easily fit into the Gaelic Irish stereotype, and allowing all of us to express our culture and heritage without fear or judgment. My point this evening is not that we need a pluralist Ireland. We already actually have that. We need to have a broader definition of Irishness. And that must be inclusive of all of our traditions and all of our backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And, you know, I think it's going to be really important as part of this that we all are able to speak about our identities. There's so many different identities across the island. I'm married to a proud Church of Ireland man from the West, and his mother is from Donegal. And I have a mixed faith family now. So I think it is really important that we're all able to feel like we belong and to share our stories. And as you say, that concern around fitting a mold is something that even I would feel if we had a very narrow definition of what Irish actually is, or what Republican is, or somebody who wants a united Ireland. So with that, I think I'll go to Councillor Bennett, a fellow Cavan man, to see if he has any comments.
Yeah, Lorraine, a very good proposal there. Actually, Lorraine would probably be one of my first voters. Her dad canvassed for me when I stood first for election, believe it or not, in 2004. But there has to be more pluralism. And I seen a question up there a few minutes ago that someone asked, will we have a national holiday on the 12th of July? Well, now, there'd be some, I see in the young council, there'd be long faces as that was brought up. But our own meeting actually falls on the 12th of July, and I took a bit of banter yesterday that I'd hardly be there. Well, I will be there, but that's beside the point. I think Brexit has brought us back 25 years. We were on a great path. Everything was rolling lovely. I sit on a cross-border committee, INCBAN, and on this platform, I'd ask you to support the INCBAN and these border regions, because we're sitting down with Northern councillors once a month, and that has kept it breaking down barriers. But I see for the last, since Brexit was mentioned, that there has become a lot of resentment to the protocol has really destroyed us. There's a lot of resentment with ordinary people in the north. I have two brothers in business in Northern Ireland, and they tell me that it's unbelievable the anger that's down there at the present time, and they wouldn't belong to the UP, believe you me, in any class or form. But there's a lot of resentment to ordinary people. But we have to, before ever we think of going for a referendum on the border, I think if there's a referendum in the morning and we won it by 51%, we're going to have 100 years of trouble down the line. There wants to be a marker there that whenever that referendum is held, we want to win it by 65 to 70%, that the vast majority of the people in Northern Ireland wants to come into the south of Ireland. And I think if that can be achieved, but there are a lot of work to be done. Unfortunately, we're starting back nearly 20 years to try and build up the momentum. And Minister Coveney, you have done an excellent job, as our Tánaiste has done excellent job since the Brexit talk started. But the one, if you can pull the rabbit out of the hat now, and that is get something that the unionists want with the protocol, that yous are seen as the good guys that brought this about. We'll come back up. We'll jump in leaps and bounds towards. You'll break down a lot of barriers. But the two motions and the motion that Andrew had there.
Thank you, Councillor. I might go to Sarah. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor. Do you want to finish?
No, just Andrew had a fantastic. I concur with all the speakers that spoke before me. We need to build trust with the people across Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Well said. I might go to Sarah Hines if she's available.
Thanks, Emer. So I just wanted an opportunity to say thank you, just as an ordinary Fine Gael member, to have an opportunity to second Councillor Hall's motion. And I think there's two parts. The first is that we should support minority faith traditions. And I think we should really acknowledge the fact that based on that personal story that Lorraine said, and probably wouldn't be out of touch with other stories, that maybe in the South it hasn't been a particularly, maybe it wasn't a cold house, but it hasn't necessarily been a warm house for people who haven't been in the sort of traditional Gaelic view of Irishness, and that we really need to have a more expanded view of Irishness. And it's not really about being a pluralist society, but actually having a more broader definition of what it means to be Irish that resonates not just with multiple faiths, but also people who may recognise no faith at all. And I think the second piece that I'd love to lend my support to, but also to acknowledge that the Northern Irish Protocol, as Councillor Bennett has just said, has alienated a lot of people. And it's worrying to be, put in the same bucket as Sinn Féin whenever Edwin Poots comes out and says that Minister Coveney and Tánaiste, possibly with our enforcement of the Northern Ireland Protocol, feel like we have really alienated the Northern Irish people across the board, and not just people in the far fringes of the DUP. So we have a rebranding exercise that we need to do to reposition ourselves, because we have a lot more in common with the other, that not just on either fringe of the far nationalist or far loyalist, but really sort of think about what we can do in common to rebuild that in a more practical way. I think people have mentioned things like education. The reality of the Good Friday Agreement is that we don't determine when it happens. The Secretary of State of Northern Ireland will pull the trigger, and we need to be ready now, not just because it will be a 50+1, so we don't love it to be 65 or 70%. The reality is a 51% vote for it, we're there. So, really very much happy to have the opportunity to support the motion, and looking forward to seeing how things develop.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I might just bring that to the Minister for Foreign Affairs as well, and just read out the comment that was made about the 12th. Sorry now. Oh, we might go ahead, Minister, and I'll find the question about the 12th.
Yeah, no, just before the motion we're discussing now was mentioned, you read out a brief comment about the power of sport, and I think it is. There are some lessons that we could learn. I mean, anyone who's read Donal Lenihan's book, for example, or anybody who's spoken to Trevor England, or anybody who's spoken to Hugo McNeill, through sport, their attitude towards others with very different perspectives on Irishness really were transformed. And in many ways, there was through sport, an understanding and a respect built. And if you listen to two interviews of two current or recent rugby players, Tommy Bowe made, I thought, a really interesting contribution to the last Shared Island dialogue that we had, and Andrew Trimble made a really interesting contribution on the Late Late Show in terms of what it means to be a Northern Ireland person. In terms of perspective, religion, identity, and also this pushback from a younger generation of not wanting to be forced to choose, or not wanting to be categorized with a label because of where they come from, because of the religion or non-religion that they may have. And I just think it is a lesson for us all that actually there is a generation growing up in Northern Ireland who want a different kind of future. And Fine Gael needs to be in tune with that. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second point I'd make is, I had an interesting debate on this issue recently around what would reunification of the island mean. And the Fine Gael perspective, I know, is very much about, this isn't about ridding the island of Ireland of Britishness. It's not about Brits out, it's about Brits in. That's what it's about, in terms of actually creating an island and a future unified country that can incorporate that different tradition, that different history, that different perspective, those fears, that anxiety, and so on, in a new Ireland. That isn't about creating, what some would regard as a Gaelic Ireland. It's actually, in many ways, the opposite to it. Embracing that Gaelicness, but also so much more besides. And I think that's really the challenge for us, so that people like Lorraine feel that this is a country that is as much theirs as somebody who speaks fluent Irish from the Gaeltacht, you know, and that's the role Fine Gael has to play, and I think it is a different perspective to some other parties that are pushing this issue and base a lot of their political campaigning around this issue. So it's a real challenge for us, I think. But I do think, like on so many other pivotal points in Irish history, I think Fine Gael can play a progressive and generous role here that can build trust and ultimately lay the foundations for the kind of change that I think many of us would like to see at the right time.
Yes, I agree with all of that, and I might just go to Neil on this as well, because I know he will have plenty to say about a shared island and a shared vision. But just to say, Ryan Lappin asked, what about public holidays in each jurisdiction, like the 12th? And Alice O'Donnell has asked, what is the route to better supporting minority religions? Does the faith-based patronage model in our system help or hinder that support? So Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Emer, and very briefly, and I think it's important to remember that, of course, St. Patrick's Day already is a bank holiday in Northern Ireland, and personally, I'd love a bank holiday in 2 weeks' time, regardless of the reasons. And it's certainly a challenge. And as the grandson of an Orangeman, I know how important the 12th is to so many of my cousins and relations. And not one of them live in Northern Ireland who are Orangemen. They're all in Cavan, Monaghan, and they go over to Rosnowla on the Sunday before. And we mightn't agree with those traditions, or certainly not the beliefs of that organisation. I know I don't. But we do need to be respectful, and we do need to look to encourage dialogue and understanding. And I think it's a really interesting point that Alice makes in relation to the patronage of our schools. And this is something that is an issue in Northern Ireland just as much as it is in this jurisdiction. And Fine Gael have a really proud record in government, particularly with Minister Richard Booton and Joe McHugh when they were in education, of not just protecting the particularly small rural minority faith schools, but also encouraging the new secular approach to education. And that's a real challenge, because our education system is dominated by faith-based schools, but particularly from one denomination. And we have to see what we want in a modern progressive Ireland, whilst respecting traditions, whilst encouraging traditions, but also using education as the key to engagement, because it's through the Shared Island unit that we can bring together national school students, primary school students, third level students, particularly those in Northern Ireland who can take part in Erasmus now, thanks to the work of Simons, Coveney and Harris, that we bring them more and more. Simon mentioned sport, and I'm sure like me, he remembers going up to play Northern Irish schools in the 80s and 90s when it wasn't always the friendliest of receptions, but it's breaking down those barriers and getting more people from the south to maybe take their holidays on the North Antrim coast to visit Ravenhill for a match, but equally encourage more people from Northern Ireland to visit our economic, cultural, educational and social opportunities here, and not just come south to get on a plane to go on holidays.
Thank you, Deputy. I do think that it's one of our greatest strengths in Fine Gael that we are a broad church, and I do think then that the respect that we can pay forward, we're also able to talk about the past in a respectful way as well, which of course is something that is still on the agenda. So I'm going to move on to the third motion, and that is the Ballyshannon branch. And there I was talking about Sligo, and I'm going to go to, oh, sorry, no, I've skipped one. So I'm going to you, Deputy Richmond. I believe you have a motion for us.
I do. Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I'm going to keep this relatively brief because I didn't expect to have so many opportunities to contribute this evening. But it is my absolute privilege and honour, Chair, Tánaiste and Ministers, to propose the third motion of our Ard Fheis, that this Ard Fheis reaffirms Fine Gael's commitment to achieving a united Ireland by consent. I do that, fellow Fine Gaelers, knowing that, as the Tánaiste alluded to, ours is the party, ours is the political tradition that founded this state, and it is my sincere belief that it will be our political tradition that founds the next state. A united Ireland, a shared Ireland, a generous, optimistic and hopeful Ireland. A number of people have asked, what will this Ireland look like? And now we really need to start having that conversation, to take back ownership of that conversation, not in a contentious way, not in a threatening way, but in a truly warm and all-embracing way. One of the great achievements of Enda Kenny as Taoiseach is immediately after the Brexit referendum, he got agreement from the European Council that if our country is to unite, that will automatically be a united Ireland as part of the European Union. And when 55% of our cousins in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union, that is something that we want to restore, to return the entire island of Ireland, our entire nation, back to status within the European Union. We believe we are the party to achieve that. This, not just constitutionally, not just politically, but crucially by uniting the people, all of the people of this island. Let's achieve that referendum. Let's be ready for it in due course. And let's aim not just to get 50.1, but let's aim to get that 60 or 75% that Winston talks about. I truly believe a united Ireland can be a better place than either the Ireland we know today or the Northern Ireland that we know today. And I think we need to be ready, and we absolutely have to reaffirm that we are Fine Gael, the United Ireland Party.
Thank you, Deputy. And I might move to Deputy O'Dowd.
Emer, just coming from a totally
Fergus,
different...
if you want to comment on this motion.
Yeah, coming from a totally different background to Neil and to Lorraine. I come from a nationalist tradition. My father was a native Irish speaker. I had, in terms of religion, I had 4 members of my father's family were actually members of religious orders. But nevertheless, my son happened to end up playing rugby and to be the captain of the Irish youth. So he got something right there. I think what I'm really saying is that we all come from different backgrounds. And I believe absolutely, just with the same conviction, that there's space for all of us in Fine Gael, from the Neil, the Lorraines, and the Ferguses, and the Emers, and the Leos, and the Simons. And I think the key issue we have to face is on the shared island. It's about winning people's hearts and minds. But the point I made earlier about developing the economy of Northern Ireland, because there are huge problems with that economy. There's massive problems, as you know, Emer, with education. It has the highest number of early school leavers in the United Kingdom. There's a huge division when children go to school, when they go to grammar school, they go to university. Most of them, a significant number, leave the north to work and live in England. And those who are left behind are left behind. So there's huge structural issues with the Northern Ireland economy that a united Ireland can help significantly. And one of the good things, and I think we need to bang this drum loud and clear, is the fact that the new dispensation that Northern Ireland goods have, to travel to anywhere in the EU, is hugely important, and there's huge increase in business between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. I think since Brexit, it's been about, I think, almost $1 billion in both jurisdictions. So we're already working and going back to where we were. And I think if we work together, and I must say that Lorraine, I felt for everything Lorraine said. I felt in a way she was talking to me, and I hear everything she said. But what we should say back to the people is that, just this simple point, the leaders of Irish nationalism, the people who brought it to our attention, the believers in liberty, equality, were in fact the Protestants, were the Presbyterians and the Wolfe Tones and the Thomas Russells and the Reverend William Jackson and so on. These were the people who gave us, the Republicans, their idealism, but they also gave idealism to the whole of society and to every human being that lives on this planet. So I think if we really, really work on this and work with those people, in the North that we haven't worked with before, that will transform our society. So I absolutely agree very much with Neil and what he said. And I think, if the party can keep both of us as members and people like us, I think there will be changes and we will attract a new modern dynamic to our country, North and South. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Fergus, for that. And yes, I'm really looking forward to getting into conversations about generational disadvantage and poverty in the North. And you talked about the highest school leavers in the UK, highest number of school leavers. And also, it's the highest level in the UK for waiting lists as well. And you've got the transfer test, or when I did it, the 11 plus, and issues at the moment in relation to school places. So, you know, I think these are all very important conversations for us to be having about you know, what's happening more in the north from an everyday perspective, moving away from just talking about identities as well. But we might bring in the Tánaiste if he is available. It would be nice to hear if he has a contribution or something to say on this motion.
Yeah, just to say I was really taken by Lorraine's contribution as well. It was a really interesting one, and raises exactly that question as to how we broaden the definition of Irishness to be something much more diverse and much more inclusive. We've done that well in the last 10 or 20 years, but quite a way to go yet. And I know from my own upbringing, being part Indian, my dad being Indian, mum being Irish, having gone to a Catholic primary school and the Church of Ireland secondary school, that I've sort of seen many angles to that. But it was interesting to hear it from Lorraine's perspective, which is very different to mine again. Just in relation to the motion, this kind of speaks to the idea that I had of setting up a Northern Ireland branch of Fine Gael, and it's important to understand what that means. You know, we have a branch in Queen's, and we can certainly continue to have branches in universities, but we don't have a branch in Northern Ireland. We have a branch in Brussels, but what we sign people up to in Northern Ireland is a category called overseas membership, which is both geographically incorrect, but also is kind of othering in its own right. And I'd love us to establish a branch in Northern Ireland. I think we should have an international branch as well, but also a branch in Northern Ireland for perhaps members of Fine Gael who've gone to live in the north, people in the north who would like to associate themselves with Fine Gael, potentially even people who are also members of like-minded parties in Northern Ireland. I don't think that should be impossible, so we're not contesting elections against each other. And that it should have real status. It would have the status of a constituency, you know, voting rights in executive council elections, voting rights when we form a government, on leadership elections, all those things. So it would have kind of a real status within the party. It would require constitutional change, and we're not amending the constitution at this Ardèche, but perhaps we could get it up and running between now and the next Ardèche. And have it there as an entity, and then put it into our constitution once we thought through all that in a proper legal format at that point. And it's an opportunity to have people that on the ground, people we can meet, and also people who can be there arranging events for us and things like that. So that's the kind of neatness of the idea, and obviously we'd have to take it forward and work out the details with the Executive Council. I think you're on mute, Emer.
I did that deliberately because somebody had to tell me I was on mute at least once during this. I might just go to the Minister Coveney on this, and also add in a couple of the questions from that we're getting in. And one is from Joseph O'Hanlon. I agree with Deputy Richmond. We need to deepen our relationship with our friends in the UK post-Brexit. What steps will the party leadership take to enhance the British-Irish Council? And then also back to sport, Brian O'Connell asks, would any joint bids for a Rugby World Cup or other sporting event with Northern Ireland be a good idea to promote North-South relations?
Well, look, I mean, as somebody who was in college in England for 3 years, who worked in Scotland, who has a lot of family in England, like so many people on the call and who are listening, you know, our relationships with the UK are interwoven in many ways in terms of life experience, business opportunities, working opportunities, family relationships, and so on. So, you know, it is essential for an Irish government to work towards protecting the relationship East-West as well as North-South with the British government, but also with British people. And I think we have tried to do that through quite a challenging period in the context of Brexit and its fallout and its disruption and its impact on the island of Ireland, which has been very difficult to manage. But undoubtedly, in a post-Brexit era, we need to put structured relationships in place with the UK government. In my view, we need an annual British-Irish summit, separate to the BIC and to the BIIGC, which is the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference, which we'll have in the next couple of weeks. But I think we need, and what I mean by a summit is not just the Taoiseach meeting the Prime Minister, although that too, but that at least half a dozen Irish ministers in areas where there's common interest, whether that's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's climate, whether it's development assistance. There are many areas, whether it's marine and marine issues and fishing. There are so many issues where we share common interests with the UK. The problem is, now that Britain is outside of the European Union, we don't meet each other in Brussels, in Luxembourg, at European Council meetings. And so unless we put a structured relationship in place that actually forces discussions and meeting and preparation by senior civil servants for those kind of meetings, we will drift apart. And we will not have the kind of familiar relationship that's needed between Dublin and London in order to solve complex problems on the basis of trust and partnership, which is essentially the essence of the Good Friday Agreement. It was about governments coming together, bringing parties together, finding consensus, finding compromise. And that is the kind of approach that's needed now to deal with a lot of the polarization that we see today. That's why Brandon Lewis and I speak a lot, and we need to speak a lot to find ways forward on, for example, the anxieties around the protocol that many unionists feel in Northern Ireland. So rest assured, we will be pushing in government, and we're pushing an open door because I think the other two parties in government with us feel the same way. We do need to put a new agreement in place, a bit like, Poland and Spain, Portugal and Spain each year have a structured engagement. France and Germany have structured engagement. Britain and Ireland need that kind of similar structured engagement. I know when Leo was Taoiseach, he very much was leading in that space as well. So I think you can expect developments in that area that go beyond actually the structures of the Good Friday Agreement, but also insist on those structures being used to their full potential as well. Because the BIC or the BIIGC, I think, can be used more frequently on some of these issues. I mean, we had a very good meeting up in Fermanagh on many issues of concern at the British Irish Council, and I think hopefully we can use that as a catalyst to move on and be more ambitious.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, it looked like a good meeting from the outside. Watching, it looked like the relationships were good with everything that was going on. But the British Irish Parliamentary is also looking at ways for more engagement, so that it's very much on the radar, which is great. I love the idea of the summit. We'll go to the fourth motion from Ballyshannon branch, if Brendan Travers is there.
Thank you, Senator, Tánaiste, ministers, party members. Great to be speaking to the Ard Fheis tonight from Ballyshannon, actually in South Donegal, but we're in the constituency of Sligo Leitrim, proudly represented by the great Frank Feehan, and Frank's a great worker on many issues. So plenty of talk tonight in relation to United Ireland, and I do believe that we need to have a United Ireland approach in relation to the topic of minimum unit price and alcohol. My motion calls on the Ard Fheis, calls on the government to promote the introduction of minimum unit pricing in Northern Ireland in line with the Republic. As we do know that in January that the Republic will implement the minimum unit pricing. Whilst I welcome minimum unit pricing and I commend the work of the government and Frank, I do believe that border counties like Donegal, Sligo Leitrim, Cavan, Monaghan, Fergus's area of Louth will certainly have an issue of cross-border shoppers going across the border for their alcohol. Not only will they buy alcohol, but they certainly will buy other groceries, furniture, clothes, etc. I think this certainly will happen because we estimate there'll be a price differential of maybe 28 to 38% in relation to the minimum unit price on alcohol. I myself is living 4 miles from Balik and Fermanagh, and there's a massive difference in the price. Asda in Enniskillen is 35 minutes away. We do know of cases in Donegal, especially where there are delivery companies picking up alcohol and groceries for customers in Donegal and delivering it from Enniskillen. I don't know how legal that is in terms of the customs and the EU, but that is happening. And many retailers have spoken to me across Donegal about their concerns in January once Ireland brings in the MUP, and then the North is going to be significantly cheaper. So I would ask for support on this in relation to speaking to our friends in Northern Ireland in relation to them maybe bringing forward the implementation of the MUP. As I said, many small off-licensed retailers have welcomed MUP. It does give them a chance to compete with the larger multiples. But in relation to the cross-border principle, we are going to see a lot of cross-border shopping. People will be buying their alcohol, and then they will be picking up other items. And there is another, as I mentioned, a number of companies delivering goods into the border counties as well.
Yeah, I think this is a really good motion. I might go to Councillor Bennett if you want to unmute there.
Yeah, thanks, Emer. Listen, I totally concur with the motion. I think that it needs to happen that it's an all Ireland pricing, because Calvin, Donegal, as the speaker has said, they're going to go across and bring cross drink, and when there's a drink, they'll get some other shopping. And I think it's not fair. If we're going to do it, we need to do it on an all Ireland basis. It used to be annoying back a number of years ago, to see ads on the television and people going from the south down to the north. And you'd think we were all alcoholics, with the amount of drink that was being carried out and put into the boots of cars. So we don't want to go back to that, and I totally support the motion.
Thank you. Just to say, Neil Richmond's going to give out to me about this, but I should have done this ages ago. Our Twitter hashtag is hashtag FGAF21. That's hashtag FGAF21. That'd be mark against my name, Neil. Can I go to Fergus on this as well, please?
Yeah, well, I'm conflicted on it. I agree, absolutely. It is an economic disadvantage if you're selling alcohol in the south and if it's much cheaper in the north. And it's also a disadvantage if you have another product that's on sale in the south that's cheaper than it is in the north, and you have that cross-border issue all the time. And I accept and acknowledge the issue, I think, is that some of the alcohol that's consumed is the cheaper rather than the more expensive alcohol. And I think there is significant evidence that, you know, that the abuse of alcohol leads to significant medical problems. And indeed, I think there's a number of fatalities every year. I think in Scotland, they showed that the fatalities actually dropped from alcohol poisoning. And every time somebody gets sick and goes into hospital as a result of alcohol abuse, that's an expense on us all. So while I certainly accept and acknowledge it is a problem, I do accept also that there are very serious medical issues which we have to take into account. Now, the northern jurisdiction didn't step up to the mark in the promises that they made, and they're holding out for somewhat longer. But I do support Frankie in what he's done. I think we've no choice. We must listen to what our medical experts tell us and public health experts tell us. And I think that the day of cheap alcohol, where you can get 24 cans for 15 quid or whatever it is, you know, it should be a thing in the past in the interest of everybody's health. So I hope I don't disappoint the proposer coming from a border county and saying what I'm saying, but I would listen to the public. I think health must trump everything else, for want of a better word than Trump. But I think health must come first in any contest of economics or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Fergus. We might move on to our final motion, as we are reaching 6 minutes to 9. Is Councillor Emma Blaine available?
Yes, thanks, Emer. And thank you so much for the opportunity to propose the final motion of this segment, and that is that this Ard calls on Fine Gael to establish branches in Northern Ireland. And I'm delighted to see that this has already been discussed in part in previous motions during the night. And in fact, I've had texts from other members of my volunteer branch delighted at the Tánaiste's commitment to establish branches in Northern Ireland. But I would nevertheless like to outline why we think that this is an important step for the island and for Fine Gael. As we further develop the concept of a truly shared island, we in Fine Gael can be proud of the efforts made by representatives of our party in recent years to build a more positive and a more inclusive island. The Trojan work of Minister Coveney in particular to relations on this island and these islands, often in the face of personal abuse, has been exemplary. The past number of years, a successful Fine Gael branch, Young Fine Gael branch has been organised in Queen's University, Belfast. In the interest of building on this work, we should now expand our party's branch network throughout Northern Ireland. We must continue to be ambitious for all of our island and to make the move to establish branches across this island. This is not with a view to contesting elections or to compete with moderate parties that we have had long and positive relations with, but with offering those in Northern Ireland the option to be formally part of the Fine Gael family. As a party rooted in the tradition of constitutional nationalism and consensus building, we can be proud of our history in this jurisdiction of being widely inclusive. We can also be proud of our party's efforts that led to the Anglo-Irish Agreement and the election of Austin Curry and John Cushnahan on behalf of our party. By establishing branches in Northern Ireland, we can build on this proud history and help ensure that our continued efforts to build a more inclusive island are representative of views and voices across the island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thanks for the shout out there to my dad and also to John Cushnahan, who I hope is watching. I'm afraid my own dad and his technical ability to get online, I very much doubt that he's here without me putting it on for him. But is there, as the Tánaiste has already spoken to this, I think you're probably very pleased with the response, but I might just give the last couple of questions and then let the panel just sum up, and if they want to reflect on your motion as well. Just to say, I mean, I think it'll be great that we do set up branches, and it's something that the SDLP always had the Dublin group, and it was a really important cog in the wheel for them in building relationships with various different parties traditionally over the years. So I think it will be great for us to take that step in the north as well. So Joe Garrahy raises the issue of finance in the context of a united Ireland. Joe asks if Minister Coveney has a sense of the EU's position and their willingness to support this financially in a similar manner as Germany and its reunification. That's something we discussed at the Good Friday Agreement Committee not so long ago. And Frank Barr, as unionism and nationalism become more diluted due to the increasing secular nature of Northern Ireland, the focus will increasingly shift to economics, and which is most likely to give people a better life. And I do think that's an important part of this is about quality of life. Vincent Ward asks, do we need a new Ireland government forum or unit to start looking at a more inclusive Ireland? And Vincent, you'd be glad to hear that the Shared Island unit is doing some great work. I would like to see it get more attention for the work that it's doing. But I might hand over to Minister Coveney to respond and to sum up because it is now 1 minute to 9.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think one thing I'd like to say is that I do think we need to be careful with the language that we use at the moment as a party. I mean, I agree with the sentiment of this debate, but we've also got to recognise that we are at a point of real vulnerability in the context of relationships on the island at the moment, particularly around the protocol and its implementation, and fears that many in the unionist community have. In that context and in the context of everything from demographics to calls for border polls every week and so on. And so I think the real challenge for us is how do we facilitate a dialogue that is inclusive, that isn't one perspective telling the others what they want and how they will be accommodated. I mean, how do we do, as Leo said earlier, how do we design a new Ireland together that includes input from people who currently don't want to be part of an Irish of an Irish unity forum or a forum in the future of the island, because there's no trust there, because the perceptions are that it is a predetermined outcome, and therefore why would they get involved? So I think there are real challenges that go way beyond finance here around how we deal with fears and anxiety and a sense of prejudice and a feeling that, you know, a once majority in Northern Ireland, which is now no longer a majority, feels that things are changing in a way that they aren't able to shape. So I think that these are difficult issues to get right at a time when we already have many difficult issues this week to deal with and next week to deal with. You know, we've got to get a First Minister in place and find a way of doing that this week to protect the institutions. I mean, can you imagine how difficult it would be to resolve the issues around the protocol without an executive in Northern Ireland, without North-South structures, where politicians are building up to an election and in many ways driving more polarization in advance of that election linked to the protocol issues. So I think we should finish on reminding ourselves what a vulnerable place we're currently in, because the theoretical arguments around reunification and how Fine Gael might bring a new and modern and much more generous and much more inclusive perspective to that debate, I think is really important. It's important to actually have that discussion, particularly at an Ard Fheis. But I think the politics of today are trying to actually find accommodation at a time when there is a lot of polarization. And the very institutions of the Good Friday Agreement, in my view, are under threat if we can't manage this week and the weeks that take us through the summer, you know, in a way that manages tension, because the absence of good politics at the moment, I think, could lead us to a very difficult place. I mean, I happen to believe that if the institutions crash because of an inability of parties and party leaders to trust each other right now, I think it'll be, having spent many, many hours and weeks trying to put those institutions back together with others, I think we'll find it very difficult to do it again. So having said all that, yes, of course, we should open a branch in Northern Ireland. Yes, of course, we need more North-South cooperation. We need to support people of a nationalist perspective and the many growing numbers of people who are sort of in between. And of course, we've got to reach out to unionism in a more impactful and effective way than we've managed to do, particularly in the context of the Brexit debates. So big challenges for us, I think. But if any party is equipped to do that in a way that is both honest and generous and modern, I think Fine Gael is the party that can manage the complexity of that challenge better than any other party, I have to say.
Thank you, Minister Coveney, and I don't think any of us underestimate the scale of the challenges that you are going to face over the next few weeks, and that we might see over the summer. Thank you again for everything that you've done and that everything you're doing, and your empathy. I think so. I just want to thank all of the panel. It's 4 minutes past 9. I could go on, but I won't. But to thank Councillor Bennett, to thank Deputy O'Dowd, Deputy Richmond, the Tánaiste, and then, of course, Minister Coveney, just a little bit of housekeeping as we move to the votes. To vote on the motions, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see 3 tabs, chat, polls and Q&A. Click on the polls in order to vote. You will see 2 options, for or against, and you can then click back to chat. Oh, sorry, that's we're finished with the comments, but I see the Tánaiste's hand up there. Tánaiste, can I give you the last word?
Just very briefly, I think to echo what Simon said earlier. We do have to be very aware of the sensitivities this week, next week, and over the summer period, and also going into what will be assembly elections next year. So it's going to be quite a difficult month, I think, in Northern Ireland. So we have to do the right thing and do what we want to do, but tread carefully in how we do it and what we say, and not to give reason to be provoked to people who may wish to be provoked. And I think we have to bear that in mind. But that's not what I came back to say. The real reason why I wanted to come back was just I know Simon's away in the Middle East at the moment, but it is his birthday tomorrow. In fact, only in a few hours' time. So I thought I'd embarrass him, but also use this opportunity to wish him a really happy birthday. And I hope your officials over there will make sure that you have a cake or mark it in some way.
Tánaiste, are you going to sing maybe like Arlene did?
No, Arlene's not a bad singer now. You don't hear me singing. Not good. I'll do it after a few pints, but it's not a sound you want to hear. It's as musical as my voice is, so.
Well, happy birthday, Simon, and safe home as well. So with that, I think I'll let you all vote, or have the votes of the jury come in. No, they haven't. Right. So I'm going to wrap up this session and thank you all, and the best of luck to the next session. Thank you very much.
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be a part of our 80th Ard Fheis. Fantastic session previous, led by Emer Curry. This one will be no doubt very intriguing and interesting and create great debate and conversation as we are looking at the future of agriculture, the opportunities and challenges of CAP and climate. Just a little bit of housekeeping rules. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Maria Walsh, MEP for Midlands Northwest, covering Galway to Donegal, Mayo across to Louth. And I'm delighted to be joined tonight by my colleague, MEP Markey, as well as leading the way, and I'm going to pass it over to him, is our Minister, Martin Hayden. Among other guests, we have Alan Farrell, TD for Dublin Fingal, who is our spokesperson on climate action. And we have Sean Finan, CEO of the Irish Bioenergy Association, Vice President of the European Council of Young Farmers, and former President of MOCRA. We have two former presidents of MOCRA with Cullum as well, but I'm delighted to first hear from our Minister, Martin Hayden, with responsibility of research, development, farm safety and new market development. To give you a little bit of backstory on Minister Hayden, a great friend of mine, someone who has followed farming, is a farming, so understands the importance of where we are right now. Just to run through the course of the next hour or so, we will hear from Minister Hayden. We will go through a number of questions. I'll open the floor as we go through 4 motions, and we're covering areas in Dublin Fingal. We have a motion in from Ballyshannon, Sligo, Leitrim. We also have one from Carabranch in Kildare South, as well as the Clare constituency also. So covering great breadth right across the country for our 80th Ard Fheis. Please get involved in the debate. We want to hear conversations and questions from you. The chat function is there, and please use hashtag FGAF21 if you're engaging on social media. We really want to create a great conversation as we celebrate the 80th Ard Fheis. I'm going to pass it over to Martin Hayden with some questions. Minister, delighted to see you in this portfolio. As I said, you are a great person for it, given your own interest, given your own farming family, given your years of service in the common agricultural policy and the belief that we are all custodians of the land. I want to ask you a question. My first question to you, Minister, is we know how important agriculture is to our Fine Gael base. We also know we are facing quite perhaps challenging period of time in terms of the CAP negotiations. We have farmers, and you speak to them on a daily basis, who are up for the challenge. They are, as I said, the custodians of the land. They have been preserving our land and farming our land for generations. And I'd love to hear from you, where do you see the common agriculture policy going? And what's your views on where we will go next?
Hey, good evening, Maria, and delighted, and hello to everyone joining us here this evening. And it's fantastic and a great honour to participate as a minister in the 80th Fine Gael Ard Fheis here this evening on this, what is always a really important session and part of the Ard Fheis. I've chaired a number of these previously to be minister, and the room was always full for them on the Saturday afternoon of an Ard Fheis. So it's a bit surreal doing it here on a Tuesday evening by Zoom, but that's the new world we live in. And I thank you for your introduction, Maria, because the fact of the matter is, as an active farmer in South Kildare with a beef enterprise and tillage, I know exactly what it is that are the pressures the farmers are facing, and there is it does feel like we're at this moment in time that is where farming and agriculture is at a crossroads, and it happens once in a generation. It happened with Maastricht. It happened with different policy changes, and at this time, this cap is a very important cap for Irish farmers in terms of the decisions that need to be made in the coming weeks regarding the mandatory level of redistribution of direct payments, where that finishes at, in terms of the ring fencing percentage for eco schemes and the impact that will have on primary producers and all the rest. But also the fact that, it's very much linked with the climate debate, and that is coming in at exactly the same time. that the challenges that we are facing in terms of changing our systems. And farmers, as you say, are very much up for that change. And I think some of the media commentary we've seen has left farmers quite demoralised. And we're used to being liked for the work we do and the fact that we produce safe, sustainable food. And that narrative has changed somewhat in the media, and farmers are feeling a bit put upon. And I take my responsibility as Fine Gael's Minister in the Department of Agriculture to really fight back against that narrative. Because the fact of the matter is that, you know, farmers in agriculture have been underappreciated for their role that they've played in tackling climate change and in addressing biodiversity down through the years. We're custodians of the land. We focus on the next generation who will take over the farm and all the discussions that go with that, but having the farm right for them. And also that, you know, I know we'll discuss it further in depth in a while with the panel, and I'm delighted to hear people's views in terms of all the different elements there. But I think, you know, some of the narrative that's around agriculture and climate challenges are unfair on agriculture, because we are a highly efficient food producing country and we export 90% of what we produce. It doesn't mean we're exporting a problem, we're actually exporting a solution, because carbon leakage has to be a really significant part of this debate. And I feel passionately about that. So, you know, farmers are up for the challenge that lies ahead for us. We are into sustainability as much as anybody, and I'd be happy to maybe expand a bit on that further on in relation to the new agri-food strategy that we're developing as well.
Absolutely. And we'll hear from Deputy Alan Farrell as we go throughout, our spokesperson for climate action. And as you said, you know, we have farmers who are solutions based, who are preserving our land, who are not getting the kudos and the credit they deserve, and certainly are from the farmers I've spoken to are really trying to understand how they can help more, or what we need to do more in order to find that balance. I want to, my next question to you, Minister, it's great when you can be on the Q&A of a minister like yourself. I'm certainly going to take raid. As a young farmer myself, we have talked, myself and yourself, at length about farm safety. In particular, also mental health and well-being of our farmers, and with responsibility of research and development, farm safety and new market development, huge areas. I know farm safety in particular for you is very important. You ran an exceptionally successful campaign around farm safety. I believe it was last year as we were coming into the cutting season, and I think every day on a farm is extremely busy, and farm safety is something that at times, and I say this as a young farmer myself, you get a little bit complacent, you get comfortable, and we need to continue to reiterate the importance of working on a farm, people coming in onto our farm, particularly young people, both on and off the farm, working with machinery. And I'd love to hear from you in terms of the initiatives that you're driving forth in your portfolio, and essentially, what can we do as a party to get behind you and support our farmers' mental health and well-being and safety on a farm?
Well, thanks, Maria. It's an absolutely huge responsibility for me, but also a massive honour to have the responsibility as the first Minister of Agriculture with dedicated responsibility for farm safety. And in the past, this was a responsibility that fell on a number of different people. And I think the focus that I can bring to this is reflective of how seriously Fine Gael take the issue of farm safety. Last year on Irish farms alone, 20 Irish people lost their lives. 9 were men over the age of 65, 3 were children under the age of 8. And I tell you, it's absolutely harrowing to sit down and read individual reports of accidents that happen or incidents that happen on farm. And I really try and avoid using the word accidents, because a lot of incidents are, into the future can be prevented. And that's really what I'm absolutely determined to do when we look at a range of different measures. And it's about changing the culture, because no one and no family that's ever experienced this down through the years ever thought it would knock on their door, that it would come and hit with them. And there's a number of measures we can take in that regard that will look to address that issue of changing the culture. So I secured €1 million in the last budget for an EIP, an innovation partnership approach, where we're having community-led, locally led ideas from the ground up, and to get 30 applications from that of really high caliber and quality being worked through now. To see that being developed is great. I want to acknowledge the role of our colleague Minister Pascal Donoghue in assisting me with establishing the first ever accelerated capital allowance for farm safety measures that came through in the budget, that became live on the 1st of January, and we're working through the final details in the application form now to get that open for people to be able to make those applications backdated to the 1st of January. A range of 14 different measures that are both to encourage investment on farms and for farmers to be able to reclaim the tax back over the first 2 years, 100% of the investment. That is both the preventive measures like anti-backing gates for livestock and chemical storages and heavy duty lifting equipment for tractors, but also to assist farmers who have suffered life-changing injuries and who want to get back in, who want to adapt their tractors for wheelchair hoists, for changing foot controls to hand controls, so they can get back to that activity that they knew in a safe manner. We then have on firm ground with our colleague, Minister Frank Feehan in the Department of Health, where together we've worked to develop an initiative where we're going to train advisors, because the farmers are the farm advisors, a very trusted role in the farm, and they were feeding back to me and to us that, you know, in some of the discussions with farmers when they would visit the farm, they were discussing and noticing signs of distress. And in the last COVID year, if you think of farmers' social outlet, all our social outlets have been diminished. But if you're a farmer living on your own with all of the stress and pressures of price income and worried about the weather and that, you know, not having the market to go out and meet people, not having mass or service, not having a local sports match or even the pub to go and meet people, this was getting in on them. So we are training 800 advisors to be able to spot and signpost supports to farmers who are showing signs of distress in that conversation over the farm gate. Because as you and I have discussed previously, farm safety and farmer health and well-being are inextricably linked, and there's much more we can do in the area of tackling that social isolation that unfortunately happens an awful lot of farmers. And I also want to acknowledge the role of our colleague Minister Damien English in the Department of Enterprise. With his responsibility for the HSA, we've worked together around the Farm Safety Partnership, which is a subgroup of the HSA, and they have been reconstituted now, and we're working closely with them in some really great initiatives in that area. And we're going to change the culture, and we're going to work really hard across the board to make sure that we drive down the unacceptably high level of farm fatalities and serious farm incidents that are happening on Irish farms.
Brilliant engagement and initiatives coming forth from your team and yourself, Minister, and it's great to see the fact that you're thinking and you're working outside the box, working with advisors who are visiting farms. Because I often think, and we've talked about it before, that, you know, farmers, when they see someone coming, be it from the department or Teagasc or an advisor, you know, there's a little bit of they're coming here to do a spot check, and I don't know, whereas that's the perception out there, whereas in actual fact there's a brilliant relationship with advisors and farmers and upskilling. I think everybody, each and every one of us should have some mental health and wellbeing literacy as well as safety literacy in order for us to catch and keep an eye on what's going on in our farms. So thank you very, very much. Just to run through, Minister is staying with us. He's not getting off the hook too easy quite yet. I wanted to flag, we had a small technical issue with the votes from the last session. And just to reiterate, don't worry, we will hear from you. We will hear your votes and your ideas and see where the party will go next in terms of the motions that were previously brought through. I will combine them all, or the tech gurus are telling me we'll combine them all from this session and the previous session right at the end of this. So you'll have opportune time to vote, and I'll run through how to do that just at the end of each of our motions in the future of agriculture, the opportunities and challenges of CAP and climate. We're going to move next to hear from our motions and the proposers of each, but I want to give a brief introduction into, if you've just joined, a brief introduction into our panelists. As I said, Minister Martin Hayden will remain with us throughout this whole session. We will also have and hear from my colleague in the European Parliament, Colin Markey. He's a member of the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development and a former president of MOCRA, and I go to him often with questions that I have in terms of farm running. So I'm very excited to hear from my colleague Colin. We'll also hear from Alan Farrell, TD for Dublin Fingal, who's our spokesperson on climate action. And again, just goes to show you the future thinking that our party has in terms of making sure climate is very much being led in this conversation in connection with Agri. And I'm really excited to hear from Alan and his views on where we can go next as a party and as an industry in a sector. We will also hear from Sean Finan. He is CEO of the Irish Bioenergy Association, Vice President of the European Council of Young Farmers, and former President of MOCRA also. We obviously breed former presidents of MOCRA in this party, and it just goes to show you here in the EPP group in the European Parliament where Fine Gael sit, we are acknowledged as the Farmers' Party. So it just goes to show you our connection and our link, both Fine Gael and the biggest European Parliament party here in the EPP. We will have 4 motions, and I will move on to them next and introduce them one by one. And then I will call on our guests, our panelists, to hear their views and thoughts on the motion. And first, proposing from Dublin Fine Gael constituency executive, we have Seamus Flynn. So I'll pass it over to you, Seamus.
Dear colleagues, as we stand at a tipping point, it is clear that climate change represents an impending risk to our farming way of life. Although a global problem, we in Ireland have the ability to influence and lead by example in our efforts to impact and stabilise our climate. Our common agricultural policy seeks to bring about change in how we manage and cultivate our natural resources, and with this, how we manage our climate. Based on the good work of former Minister Richard Bruton, an ambitious and far-reaching climate action and low carbon development bill brings an opportunity to track towards a target of carbon neutrality by 2050. It is clear that all of society will need to play a part in this transition. As we look for better ways to protect our climate, we recognise that new opportunities will arise, new ways of working, and new technologies will see us grow and adapt. Adequate investment and policy supports will be key to achieving targets. A regulatory framework that provides certainty for farmers, planning reform, and evidence and data-based policy making are critical for success and climate policy implementation. A programme of just transition will be needed to make our rural communities places where we can be born, live, work, and retire. Broadband, flexible employment, good education, and a dispersed workforce can maintain vibrancy in our rural economies. Attaining more, or at least enough, with less chemicals, less energy, less waste, will be a new challenge, and for this, we will need support with training, reskilling, and remodelling of our education systems. Supports for farmers in the management of our lands, our forestry, and our waters can see low carbon energy creation, climate-friendly building materials for our homes and offices, and quality locally grown produce become available with a reduced need for imports, transport, and a polluting society. We will need an ability to compete in equal markets, where cheap is not the key selling point, where quality is not undermined by bad practices, and where red tape does not prevent those who are eager to progress. Ireland is a good European, a good global citizen, and we have the capability to protect our country, to embrace change, and to deliver the ambitious targets of the Climate Action Bill, and protect our position within the Common Agricultural Policy. Therefore, tonight I ask that this Ard Fheis recognises the need to build on the programme of work set out in the Climate Action Bill, published by the previous government, and calls for the provision to be made to secure long-term sustainable jobs for those affected by the need to decarbonise, especially those in rural Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seamus. Deputy Farrell, I will go to you as our spokesperson for climate action and hear from you. We cannot hear you, Deputy. No, unfortunately we can't. But let me, as our tech gurus are working with Alan on connecting his audio, Sean Finan, I'll go to you just in terms of your response to that brilliant motion set out by Seamus.
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Maria, and thanks to Seamus for proposing this motion. I just have a few comments. I think climate change and the decarbonisation agenda certainly offers many challenges, but also many opportunities for those in rural Ireland. for both farmers and non-farmers. I guess the challenge of the political establishment will be to bring the public and farmers along on the decarbonisation journey. And this means that policy proposals will need to be thought through and effectively communicated. And just an example of this, I suppose, is the pressure on the horticulture sector at the moment with the stopping of peat production or peat harvesting for horticulture. And in the absence of that material being available, imports having to be sought, and in the absence of alternatives. So that's just one example, and I think it's important that we bring people along on the journey and have proper discussions before policy proposals are implemented. The green economy certainly offers many opportunities. Farmers and agriculture is positioned to contribute to this agenda, contribute to the decarbonisation of heat and transport. But by farmers getting involved in those areas, it will offer alternatives for farmers, but also offer the opportunity for those farmers to reduce their own carbon footprints within the farm gate. The bioeconomy, circular economy, bioenergy production, forestry, hemp, energy crops, agroforestry, organics, everything, all of those have opportunities. And that's only just to name but a few for farmers. However, investment, and the point, Seamus made the point, investment will be required at both a public and private level for this potential to be realised. A big bugbear, and I'm just going to conclude on this with this point, a bugbear for farmers at the moment is that they're being portrayed in a bad light in terms of our environmental credentials, and also being portrayed in a bad light by a well-resourced lobby, the environmental lobby. As we know, agricultural emissions accounts for 32% of our GHG emissions, and that is higher than other countries because of the lack of heavy industry which exists here. And just to conclude, I think farmers, and as farmers, we need to be recognised for the carbon sinks or carbon removals that we have on our farms in terms of our grassland, our soils and our hedgerows. And with the Climate Action Bill currently being discussed, it's very, very important that this is some way incorporated into the overall emissions accounting, where farmers are recognised for those carbon removal or sinks, and that the emissions from our livestock can be offset by these sinks which exist, I suppose, carbon farming in summary. So thanks, Maria, and thanks to Seamus for a very good motion.
Great. Alan, as someone from rural Ireland, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of great someone in Dublin had an issue with connectivity, but that might be a little me showing my west of the Shannon roots there for you.
Well, I'm going to say it wasn't user error, but I think we all know it probably was, but my apologies for that. I managed to get it working again, and my apologies for not having an opportunity to respond to Seamus's motion. And Maria, we started off this discussion with you saying that farmers are the custodian of our lands, and that was followed up by Martin Hayden saying that farmers are up for this, they're ready for the challenge that is being faced, and it's now a matter for government to respond appropriately with the appropriate incentives for the entirety of the sector to respond to the demands of our climate action plans as they are developed in the near future. So that the current bill that's before us really sets about the strategy as opposed to the individual targets for each sector. That is to be worked out. But I think what's really important, and Seamus has touched upon it in this motion, was with regard to the opportunities that are there for the farming sector to adapt with the likes of retraining and reskilling programs and equipping towns and villages with simple things like reliable broadband, developing apprenticeship schemes, which Simon Harris is doing for young and old, and of course improve connectivity. And that, of course, is transport connectivity. And some of the things that were mentioned by Seamus and indeed by Sean in terms of ensuring that we can develop markets for our local communities that actually are high quality, that are not undermined by cheap imports, that are not undermined by other jurisdictions lowering standards in order to what they might perceive to be a captive market. We need to ensure that everything that we do in the climate and agricultural sector is done with the farming communities to ensure, and as a Dub from Malahide, I can happily say that it is critical that we do that, because we cannot imperil rural Ireland. There are so many perceptions out there in relation to government and Dublin and all the rest of it, but a lot of it just isn't true. And what we need to do as a party is ensure that the climate action and low carbon emissions bill, as it progresses through the Dáil and as the carbon budgets are developed, is done to ensure that the sector is not damaged but enhanced. And our environment will be enhanced with that progress.
Absolutely, and it's actually great to hear, and while I made a joke about your location, but it is great to hear that, you know, climate and the work that you're doing in climate action goes hand in hand with every sector, but you know, in particular our agri sector, and it's not us and them. We're a party, and we've seen it, and we'll hear from MEP Markey and again from Minister Hayden in terms of, in particular, you know, the us and them conversation that's happening right now in the European Parliament around the common agricultural policy, and that polarization, which as a party we are solutions based and working together and driving forth. Thank you very much, Sean and Alan. We will come back to you, but I'm going to move on to our next motion coming from Ballyshannon, Sligo, Leitrim. And just before Barry, our Councillor Sweeney, speaks, I just want to say congratulations to you, Barry, because I believe you became Cathaoirleach in the last week or so. So on behalf of all the party, delighted to see, and I'll pass it over to you for your motion 2. For anybody who's just joined us, we're in motion 2 for the future of agriculture, the opportunities and the challenges of CAP and climate. So pass to you, Cathaoirleach.
Maria, thank you very, very much for the congratulations and for the warm introduction. I am delighted to be here and thank everybody, Minister Hayden, elected representatives, everybody else on the screen. It's a great honour to be here and to bring forward this second motion of this session, and that is that this Ard Fheis calls on the government, through the work of the Beef Task Force and the Planned Food Ombudsman, to ensure fairness, accountability, transparency within the food sector and ensure that prices paid reflect the work of the producers and the need for society to ensure sustainability and security of food production. Now, it appears that there were a number of similar type motions that came in, and this would be an amalgamation in terms of the wording of that motion. I would have had a few different words within this motion myself, and that, I suppose, may become apparent as I speak on. But before you start guessing, I'm not a farmer. I am a local representative, and I'm voicing the concerns of a number of small farmers in this area and indeed right across Ireland at the moment. I'm putting this forward in the interest of achieving fairness, accountability, transparency and a sustainable future for our primary beef producers, which in turn means security of the food production of this top quality product produced in Ireland for Ireland and for the worldwide market. I've spoken to a very small percentage of the 78,000 cattle farmers who generate 2.3 billion in output and represent 16% of the total agri-food export in 2020. The sector plays a very significant role in the overall rural development and provides employment in areas where other employment may not be widely available or restricted. While we spoke there about environmental opportunities and the great excitement that there is amongst many people in the new possibilities, in the new ways, there is still a lot of anger out there now and a lot of frustration amongst our beef farmers, and they are disheartened at the fact that they're producing a top quality product at low cost prices. I would like to acknowledge the sizable support schemes and grants that our beef sector is receiving and the ongoing efforts that are being made by government to address the hardship faced regarding the unfair pricing and indeed hardship in terms of transitioning to lower carbon ways of farming. But the current situation does remain that the primary producer and the families who have worked the land for generations are being squeezed out. And while retailers set the retail price and make a profit, while the processors operate and make profits, the farmer has to settle for whatever's left and is expected, in some cases, to work for nothing. They deserve a decent price, and many farmers are on the knees, and worryingly, the hope of encouraging the next generation is fading day by day and farm by farm. It was mentioned by Minister Hayden there about being custodians of the land. We are that, and farm families do want to pass this on to their children, and we need to make it more attractive and more sustainable. I do, as I say, thank the government for the ongoing work, but I would question whether a national food ombudsman is sufficient to address properly and entirely the challenges faced by our primary producers. And I would ask for a bill for the appointment of an independent meat regulator with statutory and legislative powers be drawn up in the interest of the protection of our smaller farmers against unfair trading practices and to secure a sustainable future for the beef sector. Trust and fairness must be built into the food chain between producer, processor and retailer. And the system as it stands is broken. The fact that EU subsidies and payments in order to supply a processing and retail industry with below cost produce is simply wrong, and it must be addressed as a matter of urgency. The end game here is to protect the farmer. And as was mentioned earlier, we're at a generational crossroads, and we need to make sure that we take the right road. Thanks for your time, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And accountability. You mentioned trust and fairness, and I think accountability, and it's a brilliant motion brought forward. Minister Hayden, I'll come to you, and then I'll go to MEP Markey.
Thanks very much, Maria, and thank you, Barry, for a very thoughtful submission there, putting the points of view forward. And look, I definitely agree as beleaguered beef farmer myself who's been in the BDG for the last few years, and you look at the need for Minister Creed as it was in the last government, needing to secure 50 million here and 100 million there for different schemes like the beam and the beep to try and supplement the income of farmers, and the frustration that boiled over a couple of years ago. And I completely accept that and understand it. And it was at its heart was actually low prices, but also at its heart was the lack of transparency in the system, the sense that that the unfair margin that was going to farmers was disproportionate to their costs, obviously, but also then others who were making more along the system there. So there is measures that we are determined to make in this government in terms of improving that transparency. But I think we have to be careful not to think that that alone is going to fix all of our problems. So yes, we've the unfair trading practices that will come into effect on the 1st of July, that the statutory instrument has already been signed for. And we'll have the National Food Ombudsman's Office later this year, which is obviously much more than one person. And I take on board your point, and others have made it with me, about an individual meat regulator. But the Food Ombudsman, I think, has very good potential to provide and shine a light on the transparency element that's there. But that alone won't address the challenges we face, because farmers in the past have not worked together. And farmers in the past have maybe even in some ways been their own worst enemies, in terms of some being able to be picked off by processors or by retailers directly, as the case may be. So from my perspective, when I look at the new Agri-Food Strategy 2030 that I referenced earlier, and the ambition in that to move us a step change from what we've had in Food Harvest and Food Wise that served us well in 2020 and in 2025, those 10-year strategies that we're coming out of now. And when we look at this 2030 strategy under the chairmanship of Tom Arnold, and the ambition to move to a food systems approach that talks about sustainability at its heart, and this is linked to climate, and because everything is linked to climate now, because that's what the consumer demands as well. And we as beef farmers, as well as dairy farmers and tillage farmers, everyone else needs to keep at the heart of our focus. Who is the end customer? What is it that they require? Because the other people we mentioned in the process, from the processors to the retailers, are acutely aware of the final consumer, and we need to be of that as well. But the food systems approach that our 2030 strategy talks about talks about the sustainability of farmers' incomes as equally as important as the sustainability of our rural communities and our society, equally as important as our environmental sustainability. And you can't really get one without the other, because if it isn't sustainable for farmers to farm into the future, then we could have land abandonment, we'll have breakdown of rural economies if we get our policies wrong, which will then lead to a whole host of other environmental issues that haven't been addressed now. So how do we do that? We do that in a number of ways. And as Minister for New Market Development, I'm working extremely hard to try and develop new market opportunities, open up value-added options for farmers. So in the beef sector, we recently had a very good deal in that I was delighted to get over the line in terms of market access for minced Irish beef into Japan. So previously, Japan has been a very good market for tongue and for Irish offal, but they haven't been up the food chain as much. To get mince in there gives us the opportunity to sell Irish burgers all across Japan. And that is not insignificant. There's a lot of work happening that we're undertaking in South Korea to gain access for beef there, doing our level best to get back our Irish beef back into China since the protocol we had to enact last May. And we continue to do everything to get China back open up for Irish beef again, and as well as a whole range of other options. Because when you look at Brexit and you look at the challenges of our dependency on the UK market and them starting to do other trade deals, that is a threat and challenge for us. So new market development and added value is one key element, but another part of that then is the likes and the role of producer organisations, the geographical indicators. These are all ways that add value for the primary producer to what it is they do. And identifying opportunities that Sean talked about earlier in relation to the other motion. And as Minister with responsibility for the bioeconomy, I think looking and identifying some of our waste streams in agriculture, there's much more we can do as a government in that. And I'm really determined, I know this is an area Sean feels passionately about, I'm really determined that we do more in that space also. But producer organisations, to my mind, is an absolutely key way for beef farmers to be going, where they work together and they strengthen their position in that supply chain, and they break away from the system of where they are just price takers. But obviously the transparency that we talked about that will come with the Food Ombudsman and that will come with the implementation of the unfair trading practices is obviously a key step in that regard as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. MEP Markey, I'll pass to you. And just to flag right after, before we move on to the next motion, we've had some great questions in. I'll run through them real quick and try and get feedback before we move on to motion 3. And just to remind folks, I will ask from session 1 and session 2 to vote on each motion just at the end of this session, in case you've just joined us and you're wondering where the voting is going. MEP Markey, I'll pass to you.
Thanks very much, Maria, and thanks, Barry, for what was, as Martin described, a very sort of reflective question, if you like, of all our agricultural sectors. I think beef sector is certainly the one that is most challenged at the moment. And I suppose the frustration over the last number of years that I suppose a beef task force was born out of has created a lot of expectation there in terms of where this is going to go. In terms of the Food Ombudsman, I think it's very important that I think it is a very important role, because the Unfair Trading Practices Directive is there at European level, which is very, if you like, strong powers and very high penalties for people who are found not to be adhering to it. And I think the key point here is, for years, for generations, there's always been questions about whether or not, let's say, meat factories work together, didn't. And if the Ombudsman can bring confidence there to farmers, to reassure them that there is a genuine market out there. From a farmer's perspective, when your animal comes to be ready to go to the factory, go for slaughter, you really don't have any options, and your hands are tied in terms of where you go. So to be able to generate confidence at that level would be very, very important. I suppose alongside that is the challenge with the area of convergence in terms of the cap payments. Convergence is where all the payments have been levelled off at the same level, and probably more than anyone, the beef farmers are the ones who are losing out most out of that. And I think because they traditionally would have got payments for suckler cows or beef animals and that. And I think that's adding to the challenges. So certainly there is a lot of challenges out there from the beef side. I suppose one of the ones that we've talked about a lot in the last number of years is like the Mercosur situation. And I know there was a lot of push to try and get a Mercosur deal over the line that would perhaps bring 100,000 tonne of beef into Europe over the coming years. And certainly we've expressed grave concern about that. Martin mentioned the carbon leakage earlier. There's a serious concern about the like of carbon leakage in that situation, where beef from Ireland or Europe would be replaced by beef from South America. And clearly the carbon footprint where you're cutting down rainforest and that is way more significant in that situation. So certainly, I think there are a number of challenges there. I do think that I would hold hope for the Beef Ombudsman that they would make a difference in terms of building confidence. I think the idea of geographic indicator, when you look at the Irish situation where we've an exceptional, across Europe it's recognised that we've an exceptional product in terms of a grass-based product. And if we can highlight that and promote that, I think that is a key opportunity we have. There are plenty of positives out there that we need to seize on, and the Beef Task Force has the opportunity to do that going forward.
Thank you, Colm. Before we move on to the next motion, I just wanted to flag a couple of great questions coming in. The first, and I got to give Richard Ryan credit where credit's due, because he was first in off the question. And Alan, I might come to you on this. And how can we take away stress and worry that farmers might have with climate change, that they feel that their livelihoods would be protected? Now, I know, no doubt, you're working on and driving forth a number of actions. Is there and you mentioned in the previous motion, is there a relationship there that you see, or future initiatives that we can let the members know about?
There certainly is, and today at the Climate Action Committee we had a very interesting contribution from Professor Alan Matthews, who's a professor in Trinity College Dublin, on the European agricultural policy side of the discussion. A really informative discussion about highlighting some really good things that farmers are doing, for instance, and government indeed, like the GLAS scheme, which is a really important and beneficial scheme for the enhancement of biodiversity. And I suppose what flows from that conversation about the benefits of something towards biodiversity is what will benefit the environment in terms of a reduction in carbon emissions. And that's the next step for the Department of Agriculture. Now, as a member of the Climate Action Committee, we haven't really got into the level of detail where I could sort of de-stress at the point that Richard mentioned. And my apologies to Richard, I did see your question, but unfortunately it's gone from my screen because I had to log out and log back in again. But you did talk about de-stressing farmers in terms of the concerns that they had about, to a certain extent, scapegoating the farming sector for something that it's been encouraged to do over generations, which is to produce a high quality product, to use the land in the best way it can, and to sustain farming families and be custodians of our land. So we need to ensure that the policies that come from the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Bill, on the back of the work that Richard Bruton did when he was in the department, is enhanced. So we will endeavour, and I'd like to just publicly thank Martin Hayden in particular for his assistance in terms of the hearings that the committee are going to be having on the ag sector over the next 3 Tuesdays. We had one today, we'll have one next week, and we'll have one the week after that. And my hope is that the committee can come up with some solid recommendations to the Department of Climate Action, which will then inform the Department of Agriculture. And I'm sure Martin and his colleagues will then get their teeth into it to add to the work, the substantial work that I know they're already doing.
Thank you very much. And just to quickly run through, also add, Kevin Komsky flagged for the future, very important words. As an IFA rep, I have very important amendments for tomorrow's climate bill: carbon budget, biogenetic methane, carbon leakage. Farming needs these for its future. And just to come quickly before we move on to our next motion, there was a great question for you, Minister, in here from Caroline Hoffman. What is expected time frame regarding the implementation of the farm safety initiatives? Do you have any, or are we will we connect with you going forward on the rollout dates?
Thanks, Maria. Just quickly on that one, the accelerated capital allowances came live. We got it through as part of the finance bill after the budget. It became alive and effective from the 1st of January. So any investments in the 14 different farm safety measures will be covered, backdated back to the 1st of January of this year, that meet that criteria. But yeah, you can't actually apply for that just yet because there's still some paperwork that needs to be signed off by the Attorney General and by Revenue, and it's a 3-year scheme of 5 million a year, worth 15 million euro. So I would hope to have progress on that in the very, very near future. In terms of the EIP, we've moved to phase 2, where the 30 initial applications have moved to a more detailed evaluation phase 2, where 12 of them are whittled down, and we will have those up and running within the next coming weeks and months. The Farm Safety Partnership is ongoing, and the training is commencing now for on-farm ground advisors, of the 800 advisors as well. And there's other initiatives we're working on, in fairness to AgriAware and AgriKids. The school champion pilot came to a successful conclusion last weekend, where over almost 500 schools with over 21,000 pupils participated in farm safety school projects that have been really, really successful. And no more than the Green Flag initiative in schools in terms of environment and in changing that conversation on the kitchen table, we have to challenge farmers every step of the way where we see unsafe practices becoming the norm, because we live there and we work around that area, for them to be called out and changed. And that's absolutely key. So a number of measures in that area that I'd like to expand on further in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you. And great question, Caroline. We'll move on to motion 3, or I should say motion 2.3 from Cara Branch, Kildare South. And I'll pass to Tom Malone.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening, all. Minister, MEPs, elected members, fellow delegates, and members of Fine Gael. The motion is that the Ard Fheis calls on the government to ensure that the new CAP recognises the current efforts of farmers and agri-food producers in contributing to climate action and works to safeguard a sustainable future for this vital indigenous industry. May I say, Irish farming has been proactive in implementing climate measures. They have consistently engaged with all programmes aimed at reducing emissions, both on a voluntary basis and through various set schemes. €2.5 billion have been invested in pollution prevention controls and better water quality actions over the last 10 to 15 years. Livestock farmers are now utilising low emission slurry spreaders in order to lessen emissions. Grasslands are using mixed species of grass, including more clover, to lessen methane by ruminants. There's also significant change to utilising protected urea. Farmers are participating in local catchment water areas and projects. 97% of Irish farmers are addressing water quality through programmes such as the Agricultural Support and Advisory Programme, the ASSAP. Again, farmers are following the Teagasc Roadmap plans and the new Teagasc Signpost Programme. Irish farmers recycle a huge proportion of salvage plastic, including fertiliser and seed and meal bags. Over the last decade, farmers have adopted the IFA Smart Farming Scheme, which has enabled those participating to reduce greenhouse gases by 10%. Arable farmers are now utilising cover crops, techniques to convert any losses from soils over winter months alongside more winter cereal cropping areas. Again, they're also using less inversion methods of crop establishment by using minimum tillage actions. They are also using GPS equipment to more accurately aid fertiliser and plant protection control products applied to their crops. Ireland has the third largest total hedgerows in Europe, with an estimate for 150,000 hectares, or 6.4% of all the land area of Ireland. Since 1994, 6,600 odd kilometres of new hedges and more than 3.7 million trees have been established on non-forest areas. In the Board BIA Origin Green programme, audits show that all livestock farmers reduced their carbon footprint per unit of produce by 9% in dairy and 5% in beef since 2014. Agriculture has less total livestock today than what was there in 1990. Admittedly, dairy stock has increased, but other stocks have decreased. Irish farmers have a strong record of participating in agri-environment schemes such as REPS 1, 2 and 3, alongside GLOS. The more recent REAP scheme was oversupplied by significant volumes, indicating Irish farmers' willingness to participate in green, low-carbon farming practices. Also this year, the new tillage straw chopping initiative has significant uptake. I would earnestly hope that Fine Gael in government would be able to have suitable recognition via the proposed Teagasc audit on emissions and sequestration of the capacity of Ireland grassland, hedges and trees to sequester carbon as opposed to only having the negative of biogenic methane in the carbon budget, and that the Climate 2021 bill will fully recognise this position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and brilliant motion from Cara Branch in Kildare South. Sean, I'll come to you for a quick word.
Yeah, thanks very much, Maria, and obviously thanks, Tom, for your contribution. And there's certainly, as a farmer myself, I know the work that's happening at a farm gate level in terms of all of this area. But CAP is very, very important to us as farmers, important to all farmers, but particularly farmers in the more vulnerable sectors, the sheep tillage and beef sectors. The main points that are coming forward for me in terms of CAP would be that we're going to have less budget, more conditionality, greening obviously moves to eco schemes, and really what was a food policy is now transitioning to being an environmental policy. I certainly know the farmers of the past, my father's generation were producers of food, fuel and fibre. But currently as farmers, we've been pushed down the route of food production. And in one way now, we're being crucified for that through a lot of the discussion that's happening around climate action bill and emissions from agriculture and from the livestock-based sectors. In the past, we've also seen, we saw a lot of diversification in terms of farming enterprises, whereas currently we see less of that. And I think we need to move back more towards that. I think an overarching point needs to be made that eco schemes need to be practical to implement. And I would welcome the proposed inclusion of the animal welfare measures and the antimicrobial resistant measures in the eco schemes, as I think they can complement existing practices at farm level without incurring additional costs by implementing new measures. As for farmers, we certainly need to be better at telling our story, and a big bugbear for farmers is certainly the lack of recognition we get for the climate measures we're already taking, as Tom has outlined on our farms. So really, I will conclude on that, but just saying the overall legislation is going to set out the direction of travel, but really in terms of implementation, that will be down to the CAP strategic plan, which is developed at an Irish level, and that is going to be very, very important. And we need to also ensure that the rural development programme and Pillar 2 measures are adequately funded, and certainly they contain specific programmes for the more vulnerable sectors like beef, sheep, and I see questions in there around supports for the sheep sector. Certainly needs to contain support measures around those particular areas, and also a good and strong environmental programme, but also be well funded to cover all of those potential schemes which need to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. This is where I wish we could go around the houses for your motion, Tom. But due to time, I'm going to move on to our Clare constituency executive, Geraldine Gregan. But I think a good segue into motion 2.4 is a comment from Doreen Sheridan, an infamous woman from the Donegal neck of the woods, who had asked, can we do more in our education sector to promote farming as a career with more agriculture subjects, practice subjects, and possible positive promotion by the party re the same. I think this is where cross-sectional engagement for the party in terms of Minister Hayden, in terms of Deputy Farrell, in terms of Minister Harris, and this is where as a party we can really drive forth and make real sustainable change to the future of farming. Geraldine, I will pass to you for motion 2.4. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody from County Clare, from the constituency of Clare. I'm delighted to be here at this 80th, rather unusual Ard Fheis, but it's great to see everybody and to be proposing what we consider here in Clare a very important motion here in this farming section tonight. We firmly believe that Fine Gael undertakes a review of the remission of Tánaiste. Under the headings of its original statutory obligations, its widening of the scope of that original remit, and its role, if any, in securing the sustainable future of Irish agriculture. And of course, the openness of the organisation, its openness to members, and the criteria of how you could become a member of Tánaiste. Now, in May of this year, Tánaiste lodged an appeal, and a powerful one, against the decision to grant planning permission for a fantastic state-of-the-art cheese plant on the South Kilkenny-Waterford border. This would have been, as I said, a state-of-the-art facility that secured Irish dairy farming and also huge employer in that region, much needed employment. The appeal process is likely to delay construction of the plant for several years and has raised many questions about the operations and remit, in our view, of An Taisce. Right, as a dairy scientist, I have worked in the food industry for many years, and I'm from farming background, so I feel quite confident in that I can advocate on how important the food industry and agricultural industry is to this country. Now, An Taisce. It was founded in 1948, and its original remit was to preserve buildings of scenic beauty or natural significance. But according to their mission statement on their website now, in recent years, An Taisce has been widening the organisation's original mission from the protection of built and natural heritage to a more encompassing one of vision, including a focus on ecosystem resilience and biodiversity enhancement, and essential to sustain human community and well-being. Now, I leave you with a few questions here. Who granted An Taisce the authority to broaden their remit in the first instance from their original objectives? On what statutory basis do An Taisce have the authority to refuse the construction of a plant such as that cheese manufacturing facility, a much needed one, I will emphasise again. According to their statutes, An Taisce operates on a membership basis with different membership levels available to different categories of individuals. You have the individual membership, student membership, corporate membership. However, shouldn't farmers have a huge participation in this organisation? Who exactly are the members of An Taisce, and what privileges are afforded to them? Do they get a say in the future direction of the organisation? If Fine Gael are serious about rural development, we cannot allow the delivery of major infrastructure projects to be halted by an organisation with minimal statutory authority and no visible scientific legitimacy. We must also push for An Taisce to reform its governance structures, and above all, we must include the voices of Irish agriculture, the educated voices of agriculture. So, considering all these questions that I've put before you, I would sincerely ask you to support us here tonight. As I say, I'm delighted to be here with our chairperson, Maria Walsh, MEP, our other MEP, Markey, Deputy Minister Hayden, and our Dublin deputy there, Alan Farrell, and all of our delegates are from around the country with such an interest in agriculture. I hope you see us in the banner sometime during the summer. Good evening to you all. Thank you.
Geraldine, I know first and foremost you're going to give me a run for my money in terms of moderating, and second of all, I know the gentleman on the call won't mind, but we certainly saved the best motion for last. I'm going to pass to Minister Hayden first, and then I'll go to MEP Markey.
Thanks very much, Maria. Yeah, look, thank Geraldine and thank Tom Malone beforehand for his motion. I might just touch on a response to both there in someone up here. But the last one first, Geraldine, the points you raised around An Taisce, I'm well aware of the concern that there is regarding the changes that they as an organisation have made in terms of their decision-making ability and the role their members playing that at an EGM or most recent AGM. In that regard. So I take on board the points you're making in the motion, and look, at the heart of your motion is the upset and concern that there is in the agricultural sector in terms of the continuous challenges to the Glanbia co-partnership with Royal Ayware for a continental cheese plant to be developed in Bellevue in County Kilkenny that has been unsuccessfully so far appealed through all of the systems that are open to it. And I think, I believe it was up in court today, the case. So I will be very careful in what I say, but I have no difficulty in pointing out that proposal for that cheese plant is very much in keeping with government policy. It is a Brexit diversification measure. We are overly dependent as a country, and the UK is a really important customer to us, and Irish food produce is on a par in terms of trust with the British consumer, with British produce. So that's a really good thing for us, and we really care about the British market that we import into, but we are too dependent on it, particularly post-Brexit, and my job is to try and find new opportunities as new market development. And obviously the margin for farmers and processors for milk that goes into high quality soft continental cheese is higher than it is for milk and for powdered milk. So that is new markets with added value is exactly what we encourage primary producers and processors to do to improve the income of farmers and to sustain our rural communities. So yes, the climate debate is there, and farmers are up for the challenges and are doing loads in the area, and will do more in terms of our policy in relation to acclimatise. Already we see the use of low emission slurry spreading, the use of multi-species swords, the use of protected urea. So there are a lot of measures happening in that space, and in the coming years you will see a really significant improvement in our carbon footprint and in the really positive role that agriculture can play in sequestering carbon and doing all the rest. But yesterday Glanbia set its milk price for the month of May, and Glanbia alone, leaving aside the other milk processors in the country, will write a milk check for the month of May for this year worth €150 million that will go to dairy farmers all across the region. That is money that goes straight into rural economies, and that is really significant money that is vital to our rural economies, and that is at the heart of everything we do. So in terms of supporting agriculture, and I think that needs to be borne in mind in terms of this debate, and in terms of absolutely agriculture and dairy farmers as much as anybody. We have a roadmap, and we have very big ambition in improving further the measures we'll take on the sustainability piece. But Ireland is a sustainable food capital of the world, and to have our produce replaced by somewhere that doesn't produce it as sustainably, and the issue around carbon leakage would not be good policy for the environment or for anybody sensitive to the environment or fairness in that regard. Maria, if you just indulge me for a second, just on Tom's motion of 2.3 from the Cara branch, and thank him for it. And I know Tom's passion in this area. Look, co-financing of the CAP is really important. And I myself in agriculture will be pushing hard and fighting that we get maximum support and as much support as possible for the agriculture sector and the agriculture budget in this area. I do think my department in agriculture we've shown in the past a flexibility and being agile in developing eco schemes, and Sean touched on what needs to happen, but I'm quite confident that we can work the schemes that are good for the environment, but that also suit how farmers operate. And also moving to a results-based system is a very sensible way for us to go, and you just have to see the REAP, that a new agri-environmental scheme, albeit only a pilot, limited in numbers and the amount of people it could accept. But the only people this was open to was farmers who'd never been in an agri-environmental scheme before. It was limited because of the pilot to 2,000 places, and we got over 10,000 applications. That will tell you the desire and the interest there is in farming here to enter these schemes. So it is incumbent on us, and we managed to get the spaces increased up to 5,000 and double the budget for it. But it is incumbent on us in the next CAP to have a really well structured agri-environmental scheme that addresses a lot of those deficiencies that, Tom, that you've talked about in terms of being able to be given credit for what it is we're doing. And at its heart actually is actually setting up a good inventory now and laying the base that we are establishing the inventory that's there at present of what it is that we are doing in terms of our soil and sequestering carbon, and then looking for the improved payments for the additionality that will come thereafter.
Thank you, Minister. Colm, I'll come to you.
Thanks very much, Maria. I think the last two are two excellent questions, in fairness, particularly in relation to the plant in if you like, on Tánaiste and the plant in Bellevue. Like, when you consider the efforts that were made to diversify to if you like, a European market away from the UK, the fact that this is undermining it, and the evidence is there in terms of Glanbia have already moved to place restrictions on production on the basis of this. Like, you're right in saying like it's way beyond the brief of Tánaiste. Like it is not a planning issue that they've identified here that they've choose to object again. It's way beyond the scope of planning, and I certainly think I know Martin's comment about the legal scenario, and it's probably something you have to be careful on. But on a broader point about the whole area of judicial review, which was part of a number of objections over the last number of months, both on the agriculture side and indeed on the housing side. I think there's been abuse of the judicial review process, and I think it's something that we certainly need to look at on that level. In relation to the broader picture of points that were made by Tom in the previous question, I think certainly we need to get recognition. We need a baseline that recognises all that is achieved in Irish agriculture in terms of the environment. Farmers certainly are up for it in terms of engagement. Like myself and Martin have done a number of meetings across the country over the last number of months, and we got very positive engagement from farmers in terms of a willingness to engage in addressing environmental measures. One of the problems is that other, let's say, political groups are creating a certain amount of scaremongering out there among the farming community about where, let's say, like a CAP is going, or where, let's say, the environmental ambition is going into the future. Like one of the things I looked at today, I was at an agriculture meeting in Europe, and the whole conversation about carbon farming was being discussed, and about the idea that it could be a new revenue generator from private sector through emissions trading schemes, and equally through the public sector in terms of support funding for that as well. So there are other areas about the environment that will be a positive message for agriculture. But one of the key things that came out of that today was the need to establish a baseline, and particularly to identify the carbon sink that is represented by the like of our grassland. There's talk of an indicative figure for per hectare of grassland to what that represents in terms of a carbon sink, and what that represents in terms of a revenue income for farmers. One of the problems there is that we don't have that baseline established, and we don't have the sense of what that carbon sink would be. And that research needs to be done now so that we can take advantage of that into the future. Because people have rightly identified the pressures that come on the CAP programme. But if we can identify, if you like, new sources of income through carbon farming, which the European Parliament and the Commission made a presentation to the Ag Committee today, specifically highlighting that as an option. It's one we need to embrace, but we need to have the work done here in Ireland to make sure we're ready to take advantage of that. And just one last point I'll say in relation to one of the conversations about the eco schemes. I have to give a lot of credit to the Department of Agriculture in this country in terms of their response to the eco schemes. They've issued, these are schemes which farmers will have to undertake under the new CAP programme. They've issued a number of examples in the last couple of weeks of what those schemes will look like. I think the beauty of the schemes that's been proposed by the Department of Agriculture is, at one level, they have perhaps greater environmental ambition in terms of other things that might have been suggested from other parties, but also they're practical and enforceable at a farm level. And I think that has brought confidence to farmers. And I think that'll be vital, that in the strategic plan that's developed, that those eco schemes are effective. And that Maria talked about concerns in agriculture earlier about people's sentiment. Well, the reality is there is a lot of fear being stoked up there, particularly in the constituency that we represent in relation to peatlands and things like that. And we need to bring people on the journey and reassure them that they have our confidence. We can build their confidence in terms of a path that is good for the environment and good for agriculture. Because ultimately, the bottom line to all this is, if we have a sustainable model of agriculture, that secures our future both as an environment and as an industry going forward. And that sustainable future of agriculture is key to this. And there is a road to that, which is a combination of what we're doing at the moment and building in some significant environmental measures that shouldn't be an onerous challenge to farming. And I think there is a good future there if we pursue it in that way.
Thank you, Colm. And just to reiterate, I mean, we had so many questions that I could just focus on the questions alone, and in terms of people really engaging common agricultural policy, whether you're a farmer or not, the impact of climate has on our country, and we as a key player leading the way in the European Union. The sky's the limit, and to add to Colm's point there, we really do have immense opportunity to again preserve and support the custodians of the land, keep our product to the standard, that gold star standard that we've been producing for so many years. And we have key leaders in the cross-sectional of departments, European Parliament, Commission, and so forth. So Sean, I'm going to pass to you. Sean, I'll pass to you, and then I'll go on to Alan.
Thanks very much, Maria, and I know you're under pressure for time, so I will be brief. Just one final one point on the last motion there about An Taisce. My understanding of the premise of the An Taisce opposition was around an increase in the cow numbers and increase in the size of the herd. But my understanding from talking to people in the area is that the cows are already in the system, the vast majority of them. And I don't think that has been pointed out strongly enough, and that this plant is to cater for the existing milk pool, which already is there, and to provide diversification measures, as has been outlined by the Minister. If I just could conclude by just have a few comments on, as a part-time beef farmer myself, on the beef task force, and just by way of conclusion, I think it's a very good motion from Ballyshannon and Councillor Barry. But if I could make a couple of points, the first is that the market determines the price paid to farmers, and currently beef prices are good, and that is due to interesting kind of market forces across the world coming into play. I certainly believe that the government has a strong role to play in providing the necessary legislation and regulation to ensure fairness, accountability and transparency in the food chain, and the establishment of a food ombudsman's office. I originally, when I was president of MOCRA, sat on one of the original beef forum, it was called back then, and I think it has evolved now to being the beef task force. But one thing that was very clear to me is that it is an important forum for dialogue, and it does bring the parties together. And if anything, I believe it should be meeting more often and becoming more action focused. I would like to commend the work of Minister Hayden, and indeed Minister Creed and Coveney before him, in developing markets for our Irish beef and food products. And I was looking today at the draft of the agri-food strategy as part of the consultation which closed today on it. And I was amazed to see the developments in markets that has been documented there in a very nice chart since in the last number of years. I think two final very important aspects associated with the task force are the establishment of the beef price tracker tool. That's a very, very important tool. And the second one, which I believe should hopefully put more money back in beef farmers' pockets, is the grass-fed standard. I think we have to emphasise and move from Irish beef being a commodity product to a more of a premium product, and commanding that market, premium market, as a result of it being a grass-fed product. But one worry, I suppose, today was the announcement of the UK-Australian trade deal, and the impacts from an Irish perspective on Irish beef exports to the UK as a result of that deal. So I'd just like to conclude, Maria, by thanking you, I suppose, for facilitating, and indeed for Fine Gael for the opportunity to speak tonight on the few topics, and thank all our attendees and delegates. So thanks, Maria.
No, thank you, Sean. And I should have highlighted, Sean is also a force of nature on our Fine Gael Policy Lab, and driving forth great policy in that too. And I should have acknowledged that in your opening, in the open introductions. Deputy Farrell, I'll pass to you.
Thanks very much, Maria. And just very briefly to address Geraldine Gregan's motion and from the constituency of Clare. And firstly, I'm really looking forward to a week or two in Kilbaha in the summer, Geraldine, so I might see you down there. But no, in terms of An Taisce, I think part of the difficulty that I personally have with what they did, and notwithstanding what Martin said about the legal challenge, is the basis of their appeal was not within their objections to the planning application for the process. And that is a bit of an odd one for me. Geraldine, you mentioned the word legitimacy. An Taisce is a voluntary organisation, it's an NGO, but they do have three important roles. That's the blue flag for our beaches, the Green Schools programme, which is absolutely fantastic, and then the National Spring Clean, and they're funded by the state. That gives the organisation legitimacy, and for them to go then and do something which I think actually is against their stated role, or not against it, but certainly it would be a huge addition to their stated role in terms of the built heritage and the environment which they do a really, really good job on. In fact, I'm a big fan of our built heritage, something that for generations we didn't necessarily pay too much attention to, but in Tánaiste we're there a lot of the time, along with other NGOs, are trying to keep our built heritage. But in this instance, I think they have gone too far, and I question an organisation whose stated goals are defined then getting in the way of not just a planning objective of the local authority, but also a stated objective of government. I find that peculiar.
Thank you, Alan. And you got the thumbs up in terms of heading to the Banner County from Geraldine, in case you didn't, in case you missed it, and she's acknowledging some very great points. Before I pass over for final words for Minister Hayden, and then I'll go through the motions because we have to vote from session 1 and this session, really engaging. And I have a couple of other housekeeping things just to wrap up the evening. But before I pass to you, Minister, I just want to acknowledge our former TD Pat Deering had also acknowledged and pointed in very valid points about An Taisce. Only one solution: hurt them in their pocket, cut their funding. And to acknowledge this point, I think is really important from our former deputy. Minister, I'll pass to you for final words, and delighted to hear so many great initiatives coming out from your role in the department. Farm safety, mental health, links to future developments, and a hell of a lot of work coming out on top of the fact that we are currently in negotiations for the coming agriculture policy. So I'll pass to you for the final word.
Yeah, look, thanks very much, Maria, and thanks to you for chairing this session that, as I say, has always been an integral part of every Fine Gael Ard Fheis. I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of Colm, of Alan, and of Sean, and thank the proposers for the motions as well for stimulating that debate here with us this evening. And it's great that the Ard Fheis can get to go ahead, albeit remotely. There was questions raised when the idea was first mooted, and I think it's a great initiative and allows us increased flexibility to have that type of debate that I have been having with Fine Gael colleagues all over the country. In recent months, we've held 10 different meetings from Kilkenny to Longford, Kerry to Galway, and I've got a really good sense from both the Fine Gael members and the different farming organisation representatives that have gone on those calls and have engaged with us around the range of different measures, the challenges we face, and definitely that sense that farmers have at present of frustration that we've touched on here this evening. But the one point I would make is when I was fortunate enough and honoured to be appointed by the Tánaiste as Minister for Minister of State and Department of Agriculture on the 1st of July last year, one key determination that I had was that the focus that can tend to be in that area and in that department on just the Farmers Journal and the Farming Independent on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and on Agriland as well, that we would broaden that. And I'm determined that we do that in Fine Gael in terms of positively talking about the role that agriculture plays as well, because we all have to do this in agriculture. Because the fact of the matter is that what the urban dweller thinks is really, really important. And the urban dweller is more removed now from the family farm than maybe they were a generation ago. And there are people in Dublin who don't have that first cousin who live on a farm and who don't necessarily know what happens. And where others attack and try and sully the really good food production systems we have and the really sustainable food production systems we have, or where we don't properly communicate the really innovative and ambitious steps we're taking to improve that, well, then we'll always have that problem that Sean touched on, which is market forces and what people are willing to pay for their food. So, I do think down the line, food security issues will be an issue in Europe. And I think we could see that within 10 years. And I think this narrative could turn very quickly where farming and food production again comes to the fore, like CAP was originally envisaged for. But we've faced into 2 European budgets in a row where other member states weren't willing to put the same price and value into CAP, into food production. And both of those were topped up by green money. And that's why we have that money there. So we in the Department of Agriculture and we in Fine Gael will do everything we can in government policy and influence government policy that we make sure we direct that money back into family farms and family farm incomes to sustain them, to make sure that we continue to produce that good food, that we continue to make a positive impact and an improved impact on our environment into the future. while also sustaining the incomes of our primary producers and sustaining the economic activity of rural Ireland, which is absolutely critical. And it's a great honour for me to be in this role and to be on this panel tonight as Minister in the department. And I thank you for facilitating this, Maria. It's been an excellent debate. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to all our speakers. And before we say goodnight to our speakers and our guests, I just want to do the order of the business. Dare I say the most important piece next in terms of hearing from our members and getting a steer and direction in terms of voting on motions proposed tonight. Just in terms of how to, let me just flag to vote on motions. On the right hand side of the screen, you will see 3 tabs. One is chat, one is polls, and one is Q&A. Click on the polls in order to vote, and you will then see options to vote for or against the motion that is being raised. I could have got rid of all sorts of motions tonight and just focused on the really engaging questions coming in from the chat function. So anybody who has messaged in and didn't hear their question be acknowledged or announced, please get in touch with Minister Hayden, MEP Markey, or in fact Deputy Farrell too, because like I said, the cross-sectional work that's being done, the force that Fine Gael is driving in the coming agricultural policy, preserving our custodians in the land, and making sure we're future-proof for the generations ahead. Please utilise their offices and really engage. I'm going to move on to session 1. So as I said at the start, we had a little technical glitch finishing off the session on our future together, North and South. That was brilliantly moderated by Senator Emer Curry. I'm going to run through each motion from session 1 and then move on to session 2. I will give 30 seconds to vote per each motion. So get ready at the tabs, and as I said, it's just there on the right hand side. For session 1, our future together, North and South, we have motion 1.1 titled the Good Friday Agreement, and the clock will start now for yes or no. Moving on to motion 1.2, titled Supporting Minority Faiths. And I'll ask you to vote for motion 1.2, Supporting Minority Faiths. You have 30 seconds. Now moving on to motion 1.3, it is titled United Ireland by Consent. And I'll ask you to vote for motion 1.3, United Ireland by Consent. And finally, from session, apologies, there's another motion, motion 1.4. This is our second last of this session 1, and it's minimum unit pricing in Northern Ireland. That's motion 1.4, minimum unit pricing in Northern Ireland. And finally, moving on to motion 1.5, Fine Gael branches in Northern Ireland. This is the last motion in session 1, motion 1.5, Fine Gael branches in Northern Ireland. Now we'll wrap up session 1. Thank you very much for making your voice heard and your vote count in all of those 5 motions under session 1, titled Our Future Together, North and South. Moving on to the brilliant session we just had with our guest speaker, Minister Martin Hayden. Among many other guests, we're going to vote for our first motion under session 2, motion 2.1, the Climate Action Bill. And I'll give 30 seconds to you all to vote. Now moving on to motion 2.2. This is titled Beef Task Force Food Ombudsman. Again, session 2 we just had, and I'll give 30 seconds for our members to vote. And motion 2.3, the Common Agricultural Policy. Again, motion 2.3 from the session we just had, Common Agricultural Policy, and the 30-second clock starts now. And finally, wrapping up session 2, we have motion 2.4 on Tánaiste, and this is the final vote on motion 2.4 in this session. And there is 30 seconds on the clock. Now that brings us to the end. Slightly disappointed I wasn't quick enough with the sounds to have a countdown clock, or one of my many esteemed guests on the panel couldn't give me a countdown. But I'm delighted everybody had their voice heard and their vote count. I just want to wrap up, and I apologize because we did run over. I'm failing at my moderating duties tonight, but as you followed, we had such a great, engaging conversation covering many different areas, hearing great motions from right across the country. I just want to acknowledge and thank Minister Martin Hayden. Let me announce the results as they're coming in. Results for round 1. We had 1,105. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes. I'm reading them live. And this is where 99% passed on motion 1. And I have been told, just to clarify, make sure I'm not sending anybody to bed fearful of the votes not passing. Just to clarify, did all pass, or would you like me to go through? Great, thank you very much, Colin. In HQ told me all have carried. So congratulations to each and every one from right across the country who proposed all motions. Just to acknowledge our panelists, our special guest tonight, Minister Hayden. Thank you very much, Martin, for outlining your initiatives, and we're very excited to see how we can support and the engagement as it will grow over the number of years. MEP Colin Markey, again, a stellar, new in the job, but absolutely paving the way when it comes to the Agri Committee here in the European Parliament. Deputy Alan Farrell, delighted to have you join us tonight and hear from your vision as a spokesperson for climate action, a really important space to tie in various voters, not just young, but all voters in all sectors. The cross-sectional work that you are doing is phenomenal. Sean Finan, our member, and as I mentioned briefly earlier, a member of the Fine Gael Policy Lab, so really driving forth in terms of circular economy, in terms of our farming sector, and many other initiatives coming out of the Policy Lab, supported by Sean. I also want to acknowledge, because all of us can't be here, no doubt, we all acknowledge and understand it, if we didn't have our members and those that are engaged in our 80th Ardesh. So I'm delighted to have heard from and spoken with Seamus Flynn, Councillor Barry Sweeney, again, Cogorgicus on the Coherlook appointment, Tom Malone, and finally, but by no means least, Geraldine Gregan, all the way from Clare, and has openly extended us to health and safety wise to travel down to the Banner County. It would be amiss of me not to encourage and to really make sure over the next few evenings, in prep of our long day on Saturday, hearing from our leader, Tánaiste Leo Varadkar, that we engage in social media and that we're sharing our thoughts and our vision to really encourage more and more to join our party and certainly explore it. So please utilize hashtag FGAF21 and right across the social media platforms. There's some great sessions over the next few nights. As you know, Young Fine Gael session tomorrow, tackling youth unemployment. I'm really fortunate. I'm a part of a panel looking at working for equality post-pandemic, and we'll hear from various groups that we have in the party. We also have a Fair Ireland chaired by our colleague here in the European Parliament, Francis Fitzgerald, reopening with confidence for the future workers and businesses, and that's chaired by our by-election candidate, Councillor James Gagan. Anybody in Dublin Bay South, anybody around the country, please get out and support our by-election candidate. He's a fantastic ambassador, and we're really excited to get behind him and make sure as the date comes forward in his by-election, that as a party we're supporting and we're coming behind. If you are anywhere near the constituency of Dublin Bay South, please get out and support him. And if you can't get there, social media is a great avenue for us to also support him. So there's multiple ways we can support our candidate, Councillor James Gagan. And finally, I'll just leave it there. And I just want to say thank you again to all who watched, all who tuned in. And it would be amiss of me not to acknowledge our tech and our hardworking people in HQ who has put the show on the road and made sure that the 80th Ardesh didn't go amiss, even in this pandemic. So I just want to acknowledge all the hard work in HQ, and good night, and look forward to seeing you all join tomorrow evening. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Maria. Well done to all. Thank you. Good night.